I'm Claire Parker.
And I'm Ashley Hamilton. And this is Celebrity Memoir Book Club, and we're talking about Britney Spears. Claire.
Yes.
This feels like a moment in the making.
This has been, 9 years in the making? 8, 10, 15? It started when we were both born. And Britney Jean Spears had already been born. December 2nd, 1981. And then we were born.
Later.
June 6th, 1991. October 16th, 1992. And then we met, and then we started a podcast called Hold On 1 Second. We're talking about Britney Spears.
It was our friendship solidifier.
Friendship solidifier. We met in August, not to get too datey, but I think we met in August 2017 or 2018.
17.
We met in August 2017, and we started the Britney podcast. We decided to do it in October, and then we obviously launched our first ever episode December 2nd on Britney's birthday in honor of Britney. So in 4 to 5 months, we met for the first time and decided that we should be talking an hour a week in a recorded fashion. Can you believe that we actually have an hour of podcasting for moments every week that we've ever known each other?
Okay, can I tell you something crazy? I was listening to an episode of Hoots with Tabs yesterday to just get in the zone. And it was the week after you and Mac met, and you were going on and on about this guy that you were obsessed with. And we were talking about the differences between types of crushes. And you're like, I just like this guy so much. I just like him so much. And it's so crazy because 1 month ago, you married him.
Can I say that all the time. I remember seeing him going, I'm going to marry that man. And I was like, I was right. He thought I was so crazy. Week 1, I was like, I love you.
You said you loved him on the podcast. And I was like, I wonder if he listened to this, because you actually defined it. You were like, I think our first date was 15 days ago. I've spent 7 of the last 15 nights at his apartment.
But I was right. I did love him.
You were so right.
Sorry, I'm too astute and quick on the pickup.
But that's what we were talking about. We were like, oh, I guess it was real when you know situation. And I guess you would have looked like a real fucking Looney Tune if it wasn't true. But it was true. So it's not Looney Tune. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just romantic and a little kooky.
Yeah. Well, I'm a real impulsive girl. Much like Britney Spears, I lock eyes with somebody and I go, we're going to get married. Whether or not that marriage lasts, who's to say? But we will get married. And so we started a Britney Spears podcast called Hold On 1 Second. We're talking about Britney Spears. I feel that we have done our undergrad in Britney and our master's in memoirs. So there is truly nobody more prepared to talk about this book
than us.
This is so exciting. Up top, I was nervous about this book just because I do think she's been through a lot. I think there's a lot to process. She has been drugged against her will. She has been traumatized by her family. Her trust has been broken.
Captive, without access to the same things that we have in society.
For 13 years. And in addition to that, she has been destroyed by the media. She has been through hell and back. And I said, is she ready to write a book? And I eat my words. She absolutely was. This book was phenomenal. And not just because we love Britney, but everything we asked for in a memoir, it was concise. It was to the point. It answered the questions. It got into the emotions. It was full of grace and compassion and feeling and anger, but forgiveness. It was amazing. Every interview with every celebrity who's ever met Britney says she is the kindest person in the world. And the way that shines through, she is resilient beyond, let me tell you, one day in her shoes and that'd be it for this bitch.
That'd be it. It'd be game fucking over. The way that she has survived the things that people have put her through, it is horrifying. And you see exactly how she got to where she got, the way the people around her controlled her, manipulated her, abused her. And you also see the way that this book, there is a ton of anger, but it's also a release. I don't feel that the anger looms in her.
No, she wants to find peace. She ends this book saying, I hope that one day I can keep building on the love I have and let it overcome the anger I feel. But let me tell you, I don't know how you come back from this. I don't know how you could ever forgive what her family has done to her.
I mean, I never will personally.
I left this book with a hit list of about 7 bodies.
Yeah, and I hope to hit them. And I hope to frame one singular man for all of those murders so that he does not die, but instead rots in prison where he belongs.
Jamie Spears.
Jamie, you bitch, I'll kill you.
No, we won't. We'll frame you and you will rot.
You will rot.
I hope you stay alive for 200 more years just rotting. Anyway, before we can get into the actual book, of course, unfortunately, until you sell out our shows, we have to keep promoting them. This upcoming week, we have actually a huge week. We have our first ever hosted event.
Yes, you guys, we are hosting an event at July.
In Soho, they have a pop-up for the Australian-based luggage company. They are coming to America by storm.
The tickets for our event are sold out, but there is a wait list. So if you want to come on Thursday, there is a link in the show notes to sign up to be notified if space opens up.
They're free tickets, so they went quickly, but I do think, you know how people are with freebies. They come, they go.
It'll be so fun. We've planned really good games.
So basically, it's just a wormy meetup for people in the area who want to meet other worms. If you're looking to have fun, there we're going to give away free luggage to somebody. We're going to give away old CNBC merch to people, new CNBC merch to people. We have taken all the games from our show and made them like playing games for people to get to know each other. We have a bingo card that we've worked on. We're going to a print shop this week. We're really putting our full hearts and souls and all that our little minds can come up with creatively.
And we're so excited to meet you guys.
We also, oh my God, are you guys ready for the cutest thing in the world? They're sending us CNBC luggage.
I'm so excited.
And as a bonus, Mac and Bug both get little CNBC carry-ons. I am obsessed with the idea of Bug carrying a carry-on through the airport. And I'm obsessed with the idea that her and Mac are like the same.
Bug is a rolling backpack at school kind of girl if I've ever seen one.
I love to think of her walking with her little backpack and be full of just like all of her favorite toys, which is sticks from the park.
She'd put like 7 smooth rocks in there and be like, these are my favorites. I have to bring them with me. We are also performing 2 shows in Brooklyn, the Winter Spectacular at the Bell House, December 7th and 8th.
It's going to be spectacular.
Literally spectacular. Next weekend, we are headed to Philadelphia and Washington, D.C., November 3rd and 4th. The week after, we're going to be in San Francisco and Denver, November 14th and 15th. In January, we are going to Phoenix and Los Angeles, January 18th and 19th. We are traversing the friggin' globe, and we are excited to see you there.
And you know what? Thank God we have new luggage because...
oh my God, the journeys.
By the end of this tour, so help me God, I will learn how to pack.
Me too.
I think my next step is cubes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I think also a laundry thing, because I will say, much like Bug, I'm throwing my dirty rocks back in with my clean rocks. When a dirty rock touches a clean rock, all the rocks are dirty now, and it is stressful.
So this week, we are not going to tell you how our weeks were. If you care, then you can listen to the Patreon, where we will be talking to Troy Jean Spears, aka Troy McKeedy of Beyond the Blinds, about Britney Spears, his mom. If you want to hear us ramble more than we already have, that's where that'll happen.
Also, never before seen, limited edition, we will be releasing our Who's With Tabs episode. Who's With Tabs has been scrubbed from this earth, but we are releasing a special edition Who's With Tabs episode to the Patreon. Also on the Patreon, we are going to do a full timeline, which is something that we developed during the Who's With Tabs days that really, I think, illustrates how insane the schedule was for her. How she was up against everything and there was no possible chance for a woman who was struggling to get better. The way that they worked her like a dog, like a freaking show pony. And just a lot more Britney specific stuff. Diving deep into the locker of Britney, we'll see. Maybe we'll even put some clips from our old Who's With Tabs days up that we feel have interesting info. I don't know if you guys know about the Mona Lisa album. I wish she had talked about that. That's the one thing that's missing from here.
Same.
That's all on the Patreon this week. So check it out. We've got lots of stuff there. Okay, Ashley, shall we get into the book?
I'd like to discover the woman in her, Britney Spears.
For my boys who are the loves of my life. Prologue. I actually read the full prologue. We have a video of it that we'll post to TikTok and Instagram if you're not following on our social medias. I'm not saying I'm a Michelle Williams, but I think I gave it my all.
You really did. The lighting was terrible.
What can I say? I'm an ugly gal.
The prologue is about her finding God, finding light in little moments in her life. And I do feel that the prevailing theme throughout this book is her finding light in absolute darkness. I don't think anyone could understand how much what we believe to be the luckiest gal in the world has experienced darkness. It's not random tragedy. It's not random acts of horror. It is at like the hands of the people who are supposed to take care of her.
So growing up, she starts out with, of course, she was born in Macomb, Mississippi. She went to school there, but she was raised primarily in Kentwood, Louisiana. From an early age, singing was magic. When I sing, I own who I am. I can communicate purely. Singing bridged reality and fantasy, the world I was living in and the world that I desperately wanted to inhabit. And then she gets into what is it that she was running from? Like, what was so horrible that she needed to constantly be escaping? And she gets into her family history. We learned a little bit about this in the Jamie Lynn Spears book and the Lynn Spears book. But I think it's important. And I want to say again, as a writer, Britney does a perfect job of giving you exactly the information you need, no more, no less. She gives you the context that allows you to give grace that she gives to her own father, who, again, either murdered or in prison. That is what I think would be fair for this man. But she is so compassionate. And so she gives the backstory. Basically, her paternal grandmother lost a baby after having her father. So she had the father, Jamie, and then she had another baby and the baby died. And then in response to this, she was sent to a mental institution by her husband, June, who was very abusive. Later, a sister of Jamie Spears came out and said that her own father had sexually abused her all through her teen years until she ran away. He sent this wife to a mental institution where they put her on lithium. And then she came back and killed herself, shot herself in the head on the grave of her father. The grandfather, June, was very abusive and pushed her father, was never good enough. And she goes, my father was 13 when Jean died on that grave. I know the trauma is part of why my father was how he was with my siblings and me. Why for him, nothing was ever good enough. My father pushed my brother to excel in sports. He drank until he couldn't think anymore. He'd disappear for days at a time. When my father drank, he was extremely mean.
So her father was an alcoholic throughout her entire life, though she says he was not a violent alcoholic so much as he was an absent alcoholic. But when he was around, he was so mean that she very much preferred his absence.
Yeah, she says she feels very grateful that he was gone as long as he was. Her parents met when they were young, 18, 19. Her father was a star football player. Her mother was young and gorgeous. And it's funny because you still see the adoration. She'll later be like, I saw this guy play basketball. He was a genius at it, but not as good as my dad. Like, she really wants to love and revere her father.
And he's been nothing but horrible to her at every moment of her entire life.
By all accounts, their relationship was born of mutual attraction and a sense of adventure. But the honeymoon was over long before I came along.
So they had Brian very young. Brian is Britney's older brother. I think when he was around 6, her parents had already separated and then gotten back together. And she says that when they had Britney, it was to sort of seal their reconciliation, which I think is not a reason I think someone should necessarily bring a child into the world, but it is what it is.
Around this time, her cousin Laura Lynn was also born. They were best friends.
So that was her mom's sister, Sandra's daughter. And Britney is very close with the women in her life. She was close with her mother. She was close with Sandra. She was close with Laura Lynn.
She was also close with her great-grandmother, Lexi, who was the mother of the grandmother who killed herself. And she says she loved like being with her and watching movies and learning how to put on makeup, that it was her best friend of the whole world was this great-grandmother. But at one point they got into a car accident because Lexi was older and couldn't drive anymore. And it was deemed unsafe for Britney to be alone with her and go to her house anymore. I didn't understand how being with someone I loved could be considered dangerous. And I think that's just such an interesting foreshadowing to the decisions people make about her later. Because I think as a mother, she feels how, if I love my children so much, could I be such a danger to them?
Yes.
She says from a little girl, she loved to hide, but it was because of the attention she got. Hiding was one way I got attention. I also loved dancing and singing. I wanted to hide, but I also wanted to be seen. Both things could be true. I think it's interesting because she sees these as opposites, but I actually think when she says, well, when I hid, everybody had to look for me. She wanted to be the star. And I think what isn't said explicitly, but you're supposed to get from this childhood picture is it was so chaotic. It seems like everyone was always at their house. Her father was broke and then rich and then broke again. He was filing for bankruptcy. He was an alcoholic. He was disappearing. And when times were good, everybody was over. And she was always standing on the table trying to get attention. It seems like in the midst of this chaos, Britney was always looking for a way to feel attuned to feel like somebody was caring for her, to do whatever it took to get somebody to come over and be with her.
Yeah, she also does have a lot of anxiety, and it seems like she always has. And I do think that wanting to hide but wanting to be seen in a performance sense is like a version that we see often of people wanting to be seen but only on their own terms. Mm-hmm. And so I think she likes to have control of that.
Yeah, I do think it's left out of this book how much of her social anxiety and personality are born of the chaos. Because of course she says my daughter was an alcoholic who left all the time and we were so broke. But she never like explicitly goes, and because of that, here's why I developed these things. But she's like, this is the truth and this is who I was. And I think it takes a second reading to go, okay, so I see now how your sweet little people-pleasing personality came to life, because we hear about that all the time, children of alcoholics, the way that they learn to be so sensitive to their surroundings because everybody's on edge all the time. Everybody's always screaming. There's so much chaos, and that they become obsessed with perfection and control and trying to predict other people and placate.
Yeah, I think it also breaks my heart a lot to think about wanting to be seen on her own terms and the way that her autonomy was stripped from her and she was forced to perform on someone else's terms for so many years, because it is just like another level of the trauma and torture that she was forced to endure.
So she tells this interesting story, and I don't know if I 100% agree with her, but I guess Brian was in a car accident when he was little. It wasn't an ATV, but maybe a golf cart. But they had hit head on, and he was in a full body cast. My parents were so grateful he survived, and they felt so bad for him during that recovery. Every day was Christmas. My mom catered to my brother because of guilt. She still defers to him to this day. It's funny how one split second can change a family's dynamics forever. I know that that's how it feels in her head. I do wonder if that's true. I think it seems like Lynn Spears defers to all the men in her life, no matter what, and always at Britney's expense.
Yes.
I don't think it's necessarily because of this one tragic moment. I think if there had been no car accident, Britney would still feel this way.
Yeah, I also think that just like because of the dynamics and where the family was at certain points of life, Britney was the only child of the family who never demanded anything. She just gave, and I think Lynn would fall to anyone's demands. I think Lynn is the most spineless bitch there's ever been.
She is the provider, and therefore they think she never needs to be protected. Instead, they exploit her. But she's always had this maternal provider instinct. I mean, it comes so through in the book. Even as a very little girl, I knew that between the accident and how hard my dad was on him, my brother had a difficult life. I wanted to bring him comfort. For him, I felt the most endearing, protective love. I didn't want him ever to be hurt. I'd seen him suffer too much already. And she was the little sister, and by a few years, and she said even growing up, she would go and sleep in his room and make sure he was okay with the cast, and she just cared about him so much. They had been very poor, and then the dad started a gym and on their property. They had a ton of money. They became the well-to-do family in their friend group. But when my father started drinking heavily again, his business started to fail. The stress of having no money was compounded by the chaos of my father's extreme mood swings.
So her parents would get into enormous screaming fights. She would come out of her room at night and say, just feed him and put him to bed. He's sick.
She would get so mad because, as she says, most of the time her dad would get drunk and leave. But when he would come home, her mom would scream at Jamie. And she goes, Brian and I had to suffer the consequences of her rage, which meant not being able to sleep through the night. Her screaming voice would echo through the house. I'd storm into the living room in my nightgown and beg her, just feed him and go put him to bed. He's sick. She was arguing with this person who wasn't even conscious, but she wouldn't listen. I would go back to bed furious. Isn't that awful? He was the one who was drunk. He was the one whose alcoholism made us so poor. He was the one passed out in the chair, but she was the one who ended up pissing me off the most because at least in those moments, he was quiet. The fact that even after everything her mom has allowed to happen to her, she can look back at this moment and be mature enough and empathetic enough to like see where she went wrong and feel bad for the way she treated her mom at 7 in this chaos. Like, she is somebody who wants to forgive and finds grace. Like, she is such a good person.
Yeah, I agree. I was quiet and small, but when I sang, I came alive. I had taken enough gymnastics classes to be able to move well.
That is not why you moved well, Britney. That is like something innate in your bones. I took gymnastics too.
I took dance class for like 7 years and I can barely remember if you go like right, left, or like right, left when you walk.
Okay, I'm thinking about what that would mean if you took double steps.
Right, left, right. I'm trying.
She gets places.
She entered a dance competition and won. So they start entering her in local dance competitions.
Before too long, my parents set their sights on bigger opportunities. So she auditions for the Mickey Mouse Club. And even though they needed to be 10, she was 8. And they were like, come back when you're older. They also say, why don't you go up to the city and try auditioning for other things?
She also mentions like this fear of abandonment she had when she would do gymnastics classes. There was this window where you could see the parents and she would always look over to see if her mom was there. And one day her mom left and went to Walmart and she like collapsed in a fit of tears. And then her mom came back and saw how upset she was and never left her gymnastics class again. But I am like, she is a kid who just needed her family and they've never been there.
Also, after she was told she was too young for the Mickey Mouse Club, what did they do? They took her back home where she was cleaning shellfish and serving plates of food while doing my prissy dance routine and cute little outfit. So she went back to be a waitress.
At 9.
She worked at a shellfish restaurant. And then, of course, after 6 months, they go up, they get a talent agent, Nancy Carson. They sign her and they get her that first gig.
She's understudying with Natalie Portman in the musical Ruthless. She's mostly understudying and hates it because she just has to sit around at the theater all night. She can't go home till midnight and she's just exhausted even though she's not even really doing anything. And then she gets put on as the main person and she doesn't like that much either.
She has fun for a while, but she says her breaking point is when she learns she has to do a show on Christmas. And she's like, a show on Christmas? Who would even do, like, what is the point of all this? What are we doing here? I was a little girl with big dreams. I wanted to be a star like Madonna, Dolly Parton, or Whitney Houston. I had simpler dreams too, dreams that seemed even harder to achieve and that felt too ambitious to say out loud. I want my dad to stop drinking. I want my mom to stop yelling. I want everyone to be okay.
Yikes.
With my family, anything could go wrong at any time. I had no power there. Only while performing was I truly invincible.
The schedule of New York City theater was just too much on me at that age. One good thing did come out of it, though. I learned how to sing in a theater with small acoustics. I mean, I'm so sad that she's still like looking for loopholes to be like, is this right? Like, it wasn't right. Lots of kids sing and dance. You can stay in local competitions until they're 18.
It is. I mean, it's very clear. And she's not saying it explicitly, but her parents went ka-ching, ka-ching in their eyes.
Yes. Like a little Daffy Duck.
No, Scrooge.
Oh.
Scrooge McDuck.
Totally.
The evil one.
The worst duck.
And I don't say that lightly because there's a lot of good ducks out there.
She goes back to the regular school for, I think, half a year.
And she loves it. She's like, you don't understand how good I was at basketball. And I have to say in this way, Britney Jean Spears, you are a man. She was like, I wasn't tall, but I was a killer point guard. And she was like, I love basketball and I was really good at it. I was like, Britney, you never even played for high school, I don't think. Maybe you were JV. But the way she talks about it is the way that all men talk about how good they were at baseball when they played in Little League. They were like, oh, no. They thought I could go pro until I sprained my wrist in 7th grade and it was over.
Yeah, sure. So she plays basketball and she auditions for the Mickey Mouse Club again now that she's 10. Obviously, she gets it because we know that she was on it.
Can I say she names all the other kids on it and almost everybody became famous except for Tony Luca, who is the one she had a crush on. She names like 6 people: Christina Aguilera, Carrie Russell, Ryan Gosling, and then Nikki DeLoach and Tony Luca. Nikki and Tony, obviously, I don't know. She's like, my best friend was Nikki and my crush was Tony. And I'm like, Britney, you love a rego. You went into a room of stars and said, you two average people.
I want you.
You two futureless people. You're my besties.
Performing on that show ignited me. From then on, I knew what I wanted to do and what I did there, singing and dancing.
But already within me was a push-pull. Part of me wanted to keep building toward the dream. The other part wanted a normal life in Louisiana. So after it ends, after a year and a half, she decides to go back to Louisiana and she's just like, I want to be normal for a minute.
So she goes back to high school. Her mom starts making calls, recording her, sending her demo around. She doesn't ignite any of this. And I do want that to be very clear because she says when the call came, when it was time for her to work, she was like excited about recording an album, excited to work. But I don't feel that at any point she set 1 inch of her career in motion.
Absolutely not. She is a girl who's told what she's meant to do versus I'd say like a Jessica Simpson who's like, it was me. It was me. I was so hungry for it. It was me. But also it was me because I saw that my parents needed help, which is not like a child's job. I do want to also take a minute and at the risk of sounding elitist,
the way that she talks about the time in her life that her relationship with her mom was good is one of the more trash things I've ever read.
I'm not going to make a stereotype about anybody, but they are definitely white people from Louisiana who behave in a way
that you wouldn't at our coastal elite institutions.
She goes, so that was our happy thing. And we had fun. We had a lot of fun. Even amid all the darkness, there was still a lot of joy in my childhood. So that's how this paragraph ends, is being like, see, it wasn't all bad. Let's now read the joyful memory she has.
For fun, starting when I was in 8th grade, my mom and I would make the 2-hour drive from Kentwood to Biloxi, Mississippi. And when we were there, we would drink daiquiris. We called our cocktails toddies. I loved that. And I was able to drink with my mom every now and then. The way we drank was nothing like how my father did. When he drank, he grew more and more depressed and shut down. We became happier, more alive, and adventurous. Some of my best times were with my mom on those trips we took to the beach with my sister. As we'd drive, I'd sip on my little bitty White Russian. To me, the drink tasted like ice cream when it had the perfect amount of shaved ice, cream, sugar, and not too much alcohol. That was my piece of heaven.
My sister and I had matching bathing suits and matching perms. Now today, it's basically illegal to give a little kid a perm.
No, it's illegal to give your kid alcohol.
But back in the 90s, it was just cute as hell. At 3, Jamie Lynn was a living doll, the craziest, most adorable child ever. So that was our thing. We'd go to Biloxi, drink, go to the beach, and come back happy. Okay. And then the next story is about a time how when she was in 8th grade, she started smoking cigarettes
with her friends,
just like her mom did. So she was like, fine, whatever. And one day she was driving. She goes, I learned to drive at 13. And her mom smells smoke on her.
And the question is, why is she 13 driving with cigarette smoke on her fingertips while her mom sits in the passenger seat?
So her mom grabs her hand to smell if there's cigarette smoke on her fingers. And in grabbing her hand off the steering wheel, Britney starts swerving and they run into a pole off the road. And then she goes, if it had been 1 inch to the left, baby Jamie Lynn, who was in the back, could have died.
Oh, wait, in the back, in her car seat, not buckled.
No. She had on a seatbelt, but wasn't in a car seat.
Okay.
The baby was improperly stored in the car with the other baby at the wheel for no good reason. I'm not going to sit here and say if there is a crisis, I get it. But what were you doing in the passenger seat, Lynn? Drive your children.
Put the littlest one in a car seat. Even the second littlest one might have still needed a booster.
Britney ends up by going, no one was hurt, fortunately. All 3 of us walked away. Even better, my mom forgot all about how she'd caught me smoking. The crime of teenage me smoking? Whatever, we almost died. After that, she never mentioned it again.
Oh, Britney.
Hoif.
So then she gets a boyfriend. She's obsessed with him. She loses her virginity at 14. And I do think this is important because Justin really wants credit for that, which I think is repulsive.
And it's funny because she had been in the Mickey Mouse Club, but she's like, when I went back to high school, my life was so normal. She hooked up with her older brother's friend. The brother told on her and her parents made her collect trash on the highway while Brian yelled at her. And I mean, obviously, whatever.
That's some normal high school shit.
She goes, there was something so beautifully normal about that period of my life. Going to homecoming and prom, driving around in our little town, going to the movies. But the truth was I miss performing. And her mom had been in touch with Larry Rudolph, so they cut this demo.
Very interesting that your mom had already been in touch. I tried to get back to being an ordinary teenager, but it hadn't worked. I still wanted something more. Sure, they could have let you wait.
They do the infamous day of they send her up to New York City and she sings for all of the major record labels. The first person she meets is Clive Calder. She didn't know anything about him. And she's like, thank God I didn't, because I probably would have been nervous. But he had founded Jive Records. And she says they just clicked right away, that she feels like he was her uncle in another life. They just like got each other. So she sings for everybody else in a small dress and high heels. Clive signed me right away. And so I ended up getting a recording deal with Jive Records at the age of 15.
They fly Felicia, her, at that point, I guess, guardian, later her assistant, up to New York to live with her. They get them an apartment in New York City because her mom stays in Kentwood with baby Jamie Lynn. She's also a teacher at this point. So Britney is living with I think she was a dental assistant. Britney doesn't clarify, but I think I remember her being like their dentist's assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And they're living together in New York. She's going out to New Jersey every day to record. She spends hours and hours in the booth. She says she refuses to leave for days because she wants to get it perfect. At one point, her record label is like, you got to go get dinner with this guy, Max Martin. So she does. She loves him. She flies back and forth to Sweden a few times, but she's like, I didn't even know I was in Sweden. I was just in the booth.
The booth could have been in Jersey and Sweden, whatever. I do have to share this story of Britney just because it shows her personality and how freaking cute her voice is.
She's so cute.
After working nonstop, I went to a barbecue at someone's house. I was very girly at the time, always in a dress and heels. So she was talking to people. I didn't realize that there was a screen door there. I ran straight into it, hit it with my nose and fell back. Everyone looked up and saw me on the floor holding my nose. When I tell you I was embarrassed, I swear to God. I got up and someone said, there's a screen there. Yeah, thanks, I said. Of course, everyone just laughed their little fannies off. I was so embarrassed. Isn't it funny, of all the things that happened to me in the first year of recording, this is one of my most vivid memories? That was over 25 years ago. I was devastated.
This story is also really funny. She talks about meeting Max Martin and they go to a fancy restaurant and they sit down and the waiter says, how may I help you? And then somehow she says a candle flipped over and the whole table went up in flames. We were at one of the most expensive restaurants in New York City and our table had become a wall of fire. From how may I help you to a flame wall in under a second. She ends up singing, and something very interesting is that she'd been listening to Soft Cell's Tainted Love and fell in love with the sound. I stayed up late so that I'd go into the studio with my voice fried, and it worked. When I sang, it came out gravelly in a way that sounded more mature and sexier. This is about recording Baby One More Time. That's probably the moment in my life when I had the most passion for music. I was unknown, and I had nothing to lose if I messed up. There's so much freedom in being anonymous. I could look out at a crowd who'd never seen me before and think, you don't know who I am yet. It was kind of liberating that I didn't have to care if I made mistakes. So we're in the beginning of her career. And if there's one thing that you absolutely need to take away from this podcast, this book, and my life, if I could get one message out there, it's that Britney is a genius. She was the basis of everything. That thing she just said about making her voice gravelly and sexy for One More Time. And then they wanted her to be a futuristic astronaut for the Baby One More Time video. And she said, no, it should be a school thing. It should resonate with my friends. I want to pick what we wear. And she wanted to pick the boys and make sure the boys look cute. And as we know, that was a hit single. I was 16 when on October 23rd, 1998, the Baby One More Time single hit stores. The next month, the video premiered and suddenly I was getting recognized everywhere. On January 12th, 1999, the album came out and sold over 10 million copies very quickly. I debuted #1 on the Billboard 200 charts in the US. I became the first woman to debut with a #1 single and album at the same time. She's a legend. She also talks about the David LaChapelle Rolling Stone shoot. She kind of liked it. She really embraced her sexuality from a very young age. And I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of. She says she was very precocious sexually. Yes. I mean, she lost her virginity at 14 years old. And she was an independent person from a very young age. I think she viewed herself as very adult and very independent. She moved out of her parents' house at 15 to record the biggest album that the world had ever seen. So what's happening next in her life? She's dating Justin Timberlake. They had stayed in touch after the Mickey Mouse Club. We had so much in common. It was weird, to be honest, how in love we were. And she's just just together, we just made sense. She's like, we were just so in love. She needs you to believe that they were so in love. I realized I was head over heels in love with him. So in love with him, it was pathetic. She does, even through the hazy pink cloud of love. The lavender haze? Yeah, whatever Taylor wants to call it. To me, it's pink. Well, that's, I guess, in a straight couple situation. Yeah. She sees that he's cringe, okay? Oh my God, this is the funniest. He's so cringe that even when you are head over heels in love with your teenage fucking dream, you can't help but say, well, that was kind of embarrassing. They were white boys, but they loved hip hop. To me, that's what separated them from the Backstreet Boys, who seemed very consciously to position themselves as a white group. NSYNC hung out with black artists. Sometimes I thought they tried too hard to fit in. One day, Jay and I were in New York, going to parts of town I'd never been to before. Walking our way was this guy with a huge blinged out medallion. He was flanked by 2 giant security guards. Jay got all excited and said so loud, oh yeah, faux shiz, genuine, what's up, homie?
After Genuine walked away, Felicia did an impression of Jay. Oh yeah, faux shiz. Jay wasn't even embarrassed. He just took it and looked at her like, okay, fuck you. That's funny.
That was a trip where he got his first necklace, a big T for Timberlake. Yikes.
I had a hard time being as carefree as he seemed. I couldn't help but notice that the questions he got asked by all the talk show hosts were different than the ones I got asked. Everyone kept making strange comments about my breasts, wanting to know whether or not I'd had plastic surgery.
Press could be uncomfortable, but award shows, I felt real joy. And she talks about this award show where she met Mariah Carey. She went and knocked on her dressing room door. She opened the door and outpoured the most beautiful, otherworldly light. You know how we all have ring lights now? Well, more than 20 years ago, only Mariah Carey knew about ring lights. And no, I can't just say her first name. To me, she's always going to be Mariah Carey.
And she says she won an award that night, but the perfect photo with Mariah Carey, that was the real prize. The next year at the VMAs, she does that famous performance, Oops, I Did It Again, with the I Can't Get No Satisfaction song, where she rips off the suit and has on a sparkly outfit. She was proud of how she looked. She worked really hard at the choreography.
She was so gorgeous. I'm sorry. We'll post a photo of this outfit. We'll do maybe her award show outfits on Instagram. I mean, stunning.
Later, MTV sat me down in front of a monitor and made me watch strangers in Times Square give their opinions of my performance. Some of them said I did a good job, but an awful lot of them seemed to be focused on my having worn a skimpy outfit. They said that I was dancing too sexy and thereby setting a bad example for kids. The cameras were trained on me, waiting to see how I would react to this criticism, if I would take it well or if I would cry. Did I do something wrong, I wondered? I just danced my heart out on the awards show. I never said I was a role model. All I wanted to do was sing and dance.
They say, like, what do you think? What do you think of the comments? What do you think of America's feedback? And she says, well, some of them were very sweet, but I'm not the children's parents. I gotta be me. I know that there are going to be people out there. I know not everyone is going to like me. I mean, genius. That's a deeply diplomatic response when you are being treated horrendously unfairly. I'm sorry. Did anyone sit NSYNC down and say, what do you think about the ways you're appropriating culture? Do you have any comments?
Or what about the ways you yourself are making teenage girls horny? Every girl in my 5th grade class had an NSYNC or Backstreet Boy backpack, lunchbox, keychain, and they were horny for those men.
Yeah.
Adult men.
And they never had to apologize. I felt like every time I turned on an entertainment show, another person was taking shots at me, saying I wasn't, quote, authentic. I was never quite sure what all the critics thought I was supposed to be doing. A Bob Dylan impression? I was a teenage girl from the South. I signed my name with a heart. I liked looking cute. Why did everyone treat me, even when I was a teenager, like I was dangerous? Great question.
She also then goes on to say how creeped out she was that more older men came to the audience, would leer at her. It felt like I was some kind of Lolita fantasy for them, especially when no one could seem to think of me as both sexy and capable, or talented and hot. If I was sexy, they seemed to think I was stupid. If I was hot, I couldn't possibly be talented.
She also mentions around this time that she started taking Prozac, but she doesn't really mention the overall state of her mental health at this time. She just lets you know.
When Oops, I Did It Again came out, I was a household name and in control of my career. Around the time of my first world tour for Oops, I was able to build my mom a house and settle my father's debts. I wanted to give them a clean slate.
That's very nice of you.
So here she is, working her ass off, being so talented, calling all of the creative shots, being the star in the center of it all, being this voice, being the body, being the dancer, settling her debts for her father, being the provider for her family. And not to mention also MTV. I mean, MTV made a fucking pretty penny off that VMA performance. And what did they do to thank her? They sat her down and said, watch all of these people rip you apart. Let's see if we can get you to cry. They treated her like a goddamn contestant on The Bachelor. God bless those women. But they weren't also doubly making money for ABC on the other side.
Yeah, I will say if they were as talented as Britney, they wouldn't be there.
Can you imagine doing that to somebody? It is so mean.
I mean, it only gets worse.
She does the halftime show and then she does the I'm a Slave for You performance, the 2001 MTV Video Music Award one. That's
with
so
the
famous.
Snake banana.
What nobody knows is that as I was singing, the snake brought its head right around my face, right up to me and started hissing at me. You didn't see that shot on TV, but in real life, I was thinking, are you fucking serious right now? The fucking goddamn snake's tongue is flicking out at me right now. Finally, I got to the part where I handed it back. Thank God.
She also loved doing Pepsi commercials. She was like, those commercials were intelligent and genius, and I was so proud to be a part of them. And to that I say, bitch, you had me switching to Pepsi for a minute. Pepsi's Pepsi.
What do you mean Pepsi's Pepsi? That is very funny. Then she talks about being in Crossroads, where she was playing a good girl. I think I started method acting, only I didn't know how to break out of my character. I really became this other person. Some people do method acting, but they're usually aware of the fact that they're doing it. But I didn't have any separation at all.
I was so eager to do a good job that I kept trying to go deep with this character. And she talks about then going shopping with her friend after the movie wrapped. And as she's talking to her friend, she feels her soul connect back to her body. And it was this very surreal experience.
My little spirit showed back up in my body. The trip to buy makeup with a friend was like waving some magic wand. The fact that she's going to CVS to buy makeup. God bless her.
God bless her.
Then I was pissed. I thought, oh my God, what have I been doing the past few months? Who was I?
I will say, again, her mentioning going on antidepressants, she mentions like very much losing herself and like the way that her identity felt very fuzzy inside of the borders of her being. There's a lot of foreshadowing of some mental illness, which I don't begrudge her for. I think she had an extremely stressful life. I think that there were, first of all, a family history. I think that these are all things that like with time to rest and time to like be seen and heard could have been very easily treated. But unfortunately, her family took advantage of her. They pushed her to the limits and broke her.
When I think back on that time, I was truly living the dream, living my dream. My tour took me all over the world. One of the happiest moments of my life was on tour playing with the music festival Rock in Rio in January 2001. She says she would just have so much fun. I was able to be a little bit sinful then, skinny dipping, staying up all night talking, nothing over the top. It was a taste of rebellion and freedom, but I was just having fun and being a 19-year-old girl. Then they did the Dream Within a Dream tour, which was her favorite tour. She said Wade Robson directed and choreographed it, and I give great credit to the people who put it together. I thought it was well conceived. Wade had this concept of the show as reflecting a new, more mature phase of my life. They were shrewd about how I presented me as a star, and I know that I owe them. The way they captured me showed they respected me as an artist. The minds behind that tour were brilliant. It was by far my best tour.
One of her regrets is not doing Chicago. She says that she was afraid of acting again, but it could have been a very fulfilling experience. That part of her wishes she said yes to, but she was afraid of falling too much into character again. But she was like, God, getting to play like a woman who murders men and then dances around and has fun with it, like would have been really cool.
In my personal life, I was so happy. Justin and I lived together in Orlando, of all the places in the world.
Why?
Why did they have a giant house in Orlando?
She also, I want to say, was like, I think 17 years old and living with her boyfriend.
She talks later about how people said that she was a virgin. She goes, virgin, I was living with my boyfriend. She goes, that was not me. They just like told me to say it and I never came out as not a virgin.
I also will say it kind of breaks my heart that one of the headlines I saw coming from this book sort of implies that Justin Timberlake took her virginity without asking. And I do think that like the fact that the media has created these ways to like further demoralize her, like what lesson are we ever going to learn? Do you know, like this book is coming out, it's her life in her own words and they're making up words and they're horrible.
She talks about the famous denim on denim outfit for the 2001 American Music Awards. And she's like, literally, it's just because I loved my boyfriend and thought it'd be funny to match. I didn't think he would do it. He was already wearing denim. And then she was like, we should just do denim on denim. And then she said she couldn't believe Justin committed and her stylist committed. I get that it was tacky, but it was also pretty great in its way. And I'm happy to see it parodied as a Halloween costume. I've heard Justin get flack for the look. On one podcast where they were teasing him about it, he said, you do a lot of things when you're young and in love. And that's exactly right. We were giddy and those outfits reflected that.
She also knows that he cheated on her constantly. He would go out with the girls from All Saints. There was a backup dancer he was hooking up with. She's like, I was just kind of aware and it just was what happened. And then one night she went out dancing and she made out with her choreographer, Wade Robson, and then told Justin about it. And she was like, I felt so guilty about it, but like I was loyal to him every other time before. And after that, I just made out with someone else and I talked to him about it. And she didn't deserve to be a villain for that.
At one point when we were dating, I became pregnant with Justin's baby. It was a surprise, but for me, it wasn't tragedy. I love Justin so much. I had always expected us to have a family together one day. This would just be much earlier than I had anticipated. But Justin definitely wasn't happy about the pregnancy. He said we weren't ready to have a baby in our lives, that we were too young. I could understand. I mean, I kind of understood it. If he didn't want to become a father, I didn't feel like I had much of a choice. I wouldn't want to push him into something that he didn't want.
This made me cry. Abortion wasn't something I could ever have imagined choosing for myself, but given the circumstances, it's what we did. I don't know if it was the right decision, but if it had been left up to me alone, I never would have done it.
We also decided on something in retrospect wound up being, in my view, wrong. And that was that I should not go to a doctor or to a hospital to have the abortion. It was important that no one find out about the pregnancy or the abortion, which meant doing everything at home. So we didn't even tell my family. And she said she was in horrible pain on the floor, sobbing and screaming. They should have numbed me with something. I thought I wanted some kind of anesthesia. When I tell you it was painful, I can't begin to describe the pain. It was unbelievable. I went on the ground on my knees holding the toilet. For a long time, I couldn't move. To this day, it's one of the most agonizing things I've ever experienced. At some point, Justin thought maybe music would help, so he got his guitar and he lay there with me strumming it.
Was he concussed? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my fucking life. I'm sorry. This was so sad.
After that, I was messed up for a while, especially because I did still love Justin so much. It was insane how much I loved him, and for me, it was unfortunate. I should have seen the breakup coming, but I didn't.
I can't believe you broke up with her over text.
When Justin began making his first solo album, Justified, he started being very standoffish with me. I think that's because he decided to use me as ammunition for his record, and so it made it awkward for him to be around me, staring at him with all that affection and devotion.
So he breaks up with her over text. She becomes completely numb. She goes back to her home in Louisiana and she can't even think. She can't move. She can't get up. He writes her a letter and comes to visit her.
A letter that he had written and framed. Who the fuck comes to the girlfriend you've just dumped and goes, here's something I wrote for you. I've already prepared to put it on the wall for you. I've never heard something more sociopathic than framing a breakup letter.
Justin Timberlake is going to get a lot of flack from this book, and he deserves every ounce of it. I'm sorry. I know we've talked about like giving people grace in the public eye. You like never understand what they've been through, but
not him, because he's weaponized her entire life.
I mean, he is responsible for a lot of the tragedy that has befallen her. And I do believe that wholeheartedly. I do think the way he like weaponized her pain, and she even gives him grace. She says, I don't think he knew what he was doing. I still don't think he knows what he did. Figure it out, Justin. Look at it. Sit down and look in the eye, the monster you've created and the years of pain that you like left in your wake.
So she is despondent. And even though the last thing I wanted to do was perform, I still had tour dates left in my contract. All I wanted to do was get off the road, to have days and nights to myself, to walk to the Santa Monica Pier and just breathe in the ocean.
So after the tour ends, she goes home and like people are freaking out. People are like, what the fuck do you mean you're just like going to go home and take a little break? And she's like, is that not normal?
When you're successful at something, there's a lot of pressure to keep right on doing it, even if you're not enjoying it anymore. And as I would quickly find out, you really can't go home again.
So she goes to try to spend some time with her family and relax and decompress. And her life is miserable at home. Her mom is despondent because her dad and mom have recently broken up, and her mom is kind of just dealing with the wake of her own breakup. Her sister, she just straight up says she was a total bitch. She doesn't understand the dynamic of what happened. But her sister would just order her mom around left and right. And like I said, her mom is a spineless loser.
And part of what made that period of time so difficult is that Justin's family had been the only real loving family I had. For holidays, the only family I would go to was his. I knew his grandmother and his grandfather, and I loved them so much. My mom would come out and visit us every once in a while, but she's not who I went home to ever.
It was like I was a ghost child. I can remember walking into a room and feeling like no one ever saw me. Jamie Lynn only saw the TV. My mother, who at one time had been the person I was closest to in the world, was on another planet.
I felt betrayed by how Jamie Lynn had changed. I'd bought a house for Jamie Lynn to grow up in. She was not exactly grateful for it. She'd later say, why'd you get us a house? Like it was some sort of imposition. But that house had been a gift. I'd bought it because our family had needed a new house and I'd wanted her to have a better life than I had.
She talks a lot about that in this book. And again, more grace for people who I don't think deserve it. She talks about how she doesn't think Jamie Lynn really understands the poverty in Britney's early life. She's like, Jamie Lynn just took a lot for granted. She thought everything she wanted she could have. She grew up with money and she didn't understand what the alternative was and how bad the alternative was. Like she saw Britney's fame as an imposition, but she's like, all I ever wanted to do was to give her more than I had. And all she could ever do was be mad at me for it.
Life in Louisiana had passed me by. I felt like I had no one to talk to. Going through that breakup, going home and seeing how much I didn't fit in anywhere anymore, I realized that I was technically growing up, becoming a woman. And yet, honestly, it was almost like time went backward. Have you seen The Curious Case of Benjamin Button? That's how I felt. Somehow that year, and becoming more vulnerable, I started to feel like a child again.
So let's rewind really quick. We have Britney, who grew up essentially homeschooled. Like she went to school a little bit, but for the most part was shoved onto the road to be a performer. She moved out when she was 15 years old to go live with like a dental assistant who became her best friend in New York City alone. She was 15 years old and recording an album. Essentially, the only people in her life were her immediate family and her boyfriend. Her boyfriend dumps her via text message, and her family is absolutely shamefully unpresent. And so she has basically no one in her life. And I think that that is very important to note. Like in any place in your life where you would find peers, she doesn't have those experiences.
So she's trying to get back out there. She goes to Donatella Versace to go to a party. She's like trying to get out of her house, but mostly she's just so miserable and doesn't want to see anybody. Soon after my return, Justin was preparing to release his solo album, Justified. On 2020, he played an unreleased song for Barbara Walters called Don't Go, Horrible Woman. That seemed to be about me. The lyrics go, I thought our love was so strong, I guess I was dead wrong, but to look at it positively, hey girl, at least you gave me a song about another horrible woman. Less than a month later, he released the video for his song Cry Me a River, in which a woman who looks like me cheats on him and he wanders around sad in the rain. In the news media, I was described as a harlot who had broken the heart of America's golden boy. The truth, I was comatose in Louisiana and he was happily running around Hollywood.
There's always been more leeway in Hollywood for men than women, and I see how men are encouraged to talk trash about women in order to become famous and powerful, but I was shattered. The thought of my betraying him gave the album more angst, gave it a purpose, shit-talking an unfaithful woman.
Cry Me a River did very well. Everyone felt very sorry for him, and it shamed me.
I knew no one would take my side since Justin had convinced the world of his version. I don't think Justin realized the power he had in shaming me. I don't think he understands to this day.
I went to a Lakers game with my little sister and one of my brother's friends, and the whole arena booed me. Justin told everyone that he and I had sexual relationship, which some people have pointed out depicted me as not only cheating slut, but also a liar and a hypocrite. But she says she didn't mind that he did that. In fact, that she was happy that finally somebody was like, no, she has sex, which is different than what her management team was saying about her. Like that was their narrative. And she just kind of went along with it because it felt weird to come out and be like, no, I have sex. But she's like, I was happy that that spell was broken. I was tired of being told. But if you think about it, it was pretty stupid for people to describe my body in that way, for them to point at me and say, look, a virgin. It's nobody's business at all. And it took the focus off me as a musician and a performer. I worked so hard on my music and all my stage shows, but all some reporters could think of to ask me was whether or not my breasts were real and whether or not my hymen was intact.
She goes on this trip to Arizona with one of her friends and they're just driving around through the Grand Canyon. And she like feels an alien presence and she doesn't want to say anything, but then the girl feels it too. And I found this to be like a very beautiful moment. So they have this very healing moment where they like kind of embrace what they know and what they don't know. And she says, the poet Rumi says, the wound is a place where the light enters you. I've always believed that. And that really fucks me up. I'm like, how is she so young and hurt and wise?
Justin framed our time together with me as the bad guy and I believed it. So ever since then, I felt like I'm under some sort of curse. As a child, I'd always had a guilty conscience, a lot of shame, a sense that my family thought I was just plain bad. The sadness and the loneliness that would hit me felt like my fault somehow. Like I deserved unhappiness and bad luck. I knew the truth of our relationship was nothing like how it was being portrayed, but I still imagined that if I was suffering, I must have deserved it. Along the line, surely I had done bad things. I believe in karma, and so when bad things happen, I imagine that's just the law of karma catching up with me. Britney!
It's not karma.
You are good. It's misogyny.
Justin ended up sleeping with 6 or 7 girls in the weeks after we officially broke up, or so I heard.
Oh, this breaks my heart. He was a girl's dream. I was in love with him. I understood the infatuation people had.
Ugh. Okay, this is the ballsiest story I've ever heard in my life. She sees Colin Farrell and is like, that guy, I want to bang him. So she just like drives to the set of a movie that he's on and she just walks into the production. And the director goes, oh my God, Britney Spears is here. Do you want to sit in my chair?
We wound up having a 2-week brawl. Brawl is the only word for it. We were all over each other, grappling so passionately. It was like we were in a street fight. Ugh, hot. And then she says, but besides that, she went back to like being alone, that she has terrible social anxiety. The way social anxiety works is that what feels like a totally normal conversation to most people to you feels mortifying. Being around people at all, especially at a party or some other situation with expectations of presenting well for no apparent reason, causes surges of embarrassment. I was afraid of being judged or of saying something stupid. When that feeling hits, I wanted to be alone. I get scared and just want to excuse myself to the bathroom and then sneak out. And I do think like she kind of says like, oh, I just have social anxiety. And I'm like, were you born with it? Or was it foisted upon you by an unrelentingly cruel and critiquing world?
Yeah.
Were you like right in saying every time I leave the house, every time I say something to someone, I am being portrayed as an idiot. I'm having unflattering photos taken of me. I am being forced onto interview series where they ask me why I'm such a dumb slut. I feel sad for her because she's like, I don't know, I just get anxious. And I'm like, I don't think you just get anxious. I think that you rightfully live in fear of the way that the world wants to rip you apart.
She moves to New York City and she moves to this beautiful apartment and says it was like the most incredible 4-story loft in NoHo and I never left. It would have been an amazing place to live, to like explore New York and have like a thriving social life. But she would only hang out with her security guard and Felicia. I think she went to like one party.
She says at this point, Madonna came over at one point and she just has this awakening. She taught her about Kabbalah. I'd always tried so hard to please my parents, to please audiences, to please everyone. I must have learned that helplessness from my mom. I saw the way my sister and my dad treated her and how she just took it. Early in my career, I followed that model and became passive. I'd wish I'd had more of a mentor then to be a badass bitch for me so that I could have learned how to do that sooner. If I could go back now, I would try to become my own parent, my own partner, my own advocate, the way I knew Madonna did. She had endured so much sexism and bullying from the public and the industry and had been shamed for her sexuality so many times, but she always overcame it.
It's so sad.
Meanwhile, she's like, you don't understand. I'm a Southern girl. I was taught to be polite. Stop acting like I'm evil. Everywhere I went, I sent a thank you note. She's like, I have it in my blood. It was beat into me. Be polite first. So she's like, it's crazy when people act like I'm this evil bitch.
So she does the VMAs with Madonna. They smooch. She also had this idea to put Madonna on Me Against the Music. And so she just asked her, which I think is really cute. They do the song and she says to this day, it's one of her favorites.
And then she says one day 4 men just come into her apartment. One is her father. The other 3 are strangers. And they start asking her weird questions. She's like, what's going on? And then the next day, it turns out that she's doing Diane Sawyer in her own apartment. The interview was a breaking point for me internally. A switch had flipped. I felt something dark come over my body. I felt myself turning almost like a werewolf into a bad person. I honestly feel like that moment in my life should have been a time for growing and not sharing everything with the world. It would have been a better way to heal, but I felt like I had no choice. It seemed like nobody really cared how I felt. This is the interview where she asked things like, he's going on television and saying you broke his heart. You did something that caused him so much pain, so much suffering. What did you do? And she just sat there and she hysterically cried. You can watch it. I mean, she is just berating a teen girl. It's so cruel. Diane Sawyer, shame on you.
Shame on you, Diane. At that point, I think she's like 20 years old. She's just been dumped. I mean, she never talks about Kevin Federline or anyone else the way she talks about loving Justin. Like, she was so in love with him. He ripped her apart and then made money off of it. And it is so sad because I don't believe he ever loved her. It seems like no one cared how I felt. And that is completely true. People had a narrative that they wanted to spin. I don't think she ever even got a high school diploma. Like, she does not have the ability to communicate the way people are trying to communicate with her, because they're not communicating with her. They're communicating over her. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that she just had this fire inside of her, this flame that wanted to trust people. And she kept trying to keep it alive. And people kept saying, you literally, like, not me, bitch.
So then she's like, I don't know. I was just trying to figure my life out. I went home to Louisiana one day. It was New Year's Eve. My mom kept telling us to be quiet. And then she goes, and then I realized I had enough money that we didn't have to be in Louisiana. So we all went to Vegas. Paris Hilton showed up. Before I knew it, we got on tables, took off our shoes, and ran through the whole club like fairy dusted idiots. No one got hurt, and I had the best time with Paris. We were just playing, and we still do every time we get together. And she says like they were just bored, and they stayed up all night watching the Mona Lisa smile in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they were like, fuck it, let's get married. People have asked me if I loved him. To be clear, he and I were not in love. I was honestly just very drunk, and probably in a more general sense at that time in my life, very bored. And then I guess her parents flew out and freaked out, and they were like, you have to get it annulled. And she was just like, okay, like what I did wasn't great, but the way they were treating me like a fucking criminal.
My family was so against the wedding that I started to think maybe I accidentally committed a brilliant act, because I realized something about my being under their control and not having a stronger connection to someone else had become very, very important to them.
What do I have over you guys? I wondered. Why would someone else be such a huge threat? Perhaps it's worth mentioning that by this point, I was supporting them financially. And then she says, everyone's like, what do you do next? Where do you go from here? She's like, I don't know. I just wanted my life back. I felt like I was missing my life. Of course, I sent her out on the road. This is the tour that marked a change in my relationship with my brother, Brian. He was on the team making really good money. He did her Elizabeth Arden deal. He got paid very well for her Onyx tour deal. And now she's like, okay, I'm going out miserable. And meanwhile, you get to enjoy your life in Los Angeles and New York on my dime. I lost track of my brother in those years. And so in many ways, it felt like I lost Justin and Brian around the same time.
So then she injures her knee again. I think this is like the second time she's injured her knee, but she only has to reschedule 2 dates on this knee injury. But it does set in motion a future knee injury that completely derails her life.
She meets Kevin Federline. They just lock eyes one night and it's friggin' on. Something that made me feel like I could escape everything that was hard in my life. That was the first night we met. He held me, and I mean, he held me in a pool for hours. And she's like, that's what I wanted. It was beyond a sexual thing. It was intimate. He held me as long as I wanted to be held. Had anyone in my life ever done that before? If so, I couldn't remember when. And was there anything better? And she just says, all I ever wanted was to feel strong and sexy and held. And he did that. He just held me. That's all it fucking took. She just wanted somebody to like pay attention and care.
All she wanted was someone to just care about her. And Kevin Federline could literally only do it for like 18 months.
And he liked me the way I was. As a woman who spent so much time trying to live up to society's expectations, being with a man who gave me permission to be exactly who I was felt like such a gift.
So she brings Kevin on tour. They have so much fun together. She loves goofing. She's a goof, you guys. Let her goof.
She hurts her knee again in June during the tour of Outrageous.
Of Onyx Hotel.
Yeah, doing the Outrageous video. And she has this one little line. She goes, last time I went through physical therapy, it was excruciating. So when the doctors offered me a Vicodin, I took it. I didn't want to experience that level of pain again. I did wonder why she wrote that, because it seemed to foreshadow something that never was written again in this book.
Can I say, I wonder if we read her court documents, if her family weaponized her use of Vicodin against her at some point.
Okay, that would make sense. Because I was like, what is she trying to explain here? Is she trying to make the point that she so rarely did drugs that her taking Vicodin for an injury was...
I think that is the point that she's trying to make. And I think it's because anytime she has ever taken a substance, like later in the book, she's taking caffeine pills and her dad weaponizes that. So I think the fact that she has taken Vicodin, I think if she didn't mention it, it would be later weaponized to be like she hid her opiate use.
Mm-hmm.
But now she can be like, yeah, when they say that, this is what they're talking about.
So for the first time, she goes to Manhattan, she gets in her princess bed. And if anyone, family, friends, people in my business wanted to talk to me during that time, I said, leave me alone. Part of it was that I believed that I had earned the right to make my own decisions in my personal life after such a grueling schedule. I felt like I'd been manipulated into going straight back to work after the breakup with Justin because it was all I knew. The Onyx tour was a mistake, but in my mind, I thought I should just do what I was supposed to do, which was work. At this point, she's now engaged to Kevin, and everybody is like, don't be engaged to him.
So then she marries him in a surprise wedding and is like, shut the fuck up.
Not a lot of people were happy for Kevin and me. Whether or not I liked it, I was one of the biggest stars in the world at that time. He was living a more private life. I had to defend a relationship to everybody. Can I say,
Yeah.
What a way to call someone unsuccessful. When people say like, why aren't you bigger in your career? I'll go, I'm living a more private life right now.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, I can't get more people to listen to my podcast.
I'm living a private life at the request of the people who have let me be private.
I've offered myself to the public and they've actually said, no, stay private.
So then she gets pregnant basically right away. And she says that pregnant, she wanted to bang, eat, and be mean.
You did not want to hear from me those whole 2 years. I did not want to be around almost anyone at all. I was hateful. I didn't want anyone, not even my mom, to come near me. I was a real mama bear, America's sweetheart, and the meanest woman alive.
And she takes this time to apologize to Jamie Lynn Spears' Zoe 101 co-star, I think Alexa something or other, the one who came out and was like, Jamie Lynn accused me of bullying her on set. And then she like had her pregnant sister, the most famous pop star in the world, come scream at me. And then she like got fired from the show. And Britney Spears takes the time in her book to apologize to her. Because she's like, I was mean, I was crazy, I was protective. And Jamie Lynn, my little sister, said she needed me. And so I came and I didn't ask questions, but I should have. And I'm like, damn, bitch. People were really mean to you. I would have given you a pass here.
So Sean Preston is born September 14th, 2005. And then I think her second son is born like September 12th, 2006.
Yeah.
She got pregnant 3 months later. It was hard on my body and there was a lot of sadness and loneliness in that time. I felt like so much of the world was against me. The main danger I had to watch out for was the aggression of the paparazzi. If I stayed out of the public eye, surely eventually I thought the photographers would leave me alone. But whether I was sitting at home or trying to go to a store, photographers found me every day and all night. There they were, waiting for me to come out.
Britney Spears got huge. Look, she's not wearing makeup, as if those two things were some kind of a sin, as if gaining weight was something unkind I'd done to them personally, a betrayal.
At what point did I promise to stay 17 for the rest of my life? Good question. So then she goes into the early days. When Sean Preston was very little, Kevin started working harder on his own music. He wanted to make his own name, which is something I encouraged. He was recording a lot. Sometimes I'd drop by the studio where he was working. It seemed like a clubhouse. I could smell the weed wafting before I even walked in, and he and the other guys would be getting high, and it felt like I was in the way. Sometimes she was legit rejected from the studio. The security guard who used to work for her and now work for him would say, you're not allowed in here.
Maybe this is the way married couples are, I thought, as Kevin and I grew more estranged. You take turns letting each other be a little selfish. This is his first taste of fame for himself. I should let him have it. Ew, Kevin. Popozão.
Which means big ass in Portuguese.
Which is what he is in American.
Got him. But he wouldn't see me. It seemed like he wanted to pretend I didn't exist. And then she said one night he came home and was like, I was just at a party and Lindsay Lohan and Justin Timberlake were there.
She's like, yeah, I know them. I lived with Justin, you fucking bitch.
Do you think I care about your stupid party? I thought. Do you have any idea how many parties like that I've been to? I've known some of these people longer than I've known you.
I mean, all of them.
Kevin was just so enthralled with the fame and the power. Again and again in my life, I've seen fame and money ruin people. I saw it happen with Kevin in slow motion. In my experience, when most people, especially men, get that type of attention, it's all over. They love it too much and it's not good for them.
Fame, that world isn't real, my friends. It's not real. You go along with it because of course it's going to pay the family's bills and everything. But for me, there was an essence of real life missing from it. And I think that's why I had my babies. Can I say? That's what we always predicted. We said there are so many people who like have babies as a parachute out. And I don't think that's wrong. Like, I'm not saying I think that what she did was wrong, but I think that like 5 years ago, we predicted that she like just wanted to stop and have her own family and like walk away. And then Kevin Federline was a fucking menace.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny throughout this book, she gushes in this book.
Yeah.
Plug for gushers.
Season 2 coming soon. When? TBD.
But like she gushes about Mariah Carey. She gushes about Carrie Russell. She gushes about Jennifer Lopez, who she thinks is so good at handling herself with fame. Later, she gushes about Reese Witherspoon, who she looks up to as a role model, as someone who handles themselves with grace and is respected for being intelligent, but also kind. And I just like love that she is a stan.
I will say one thing that really comes through in this book is that she has so much love to give. Mm-hmm. And she has so much energy that she wants to pour into the people in her life that she cares the most about. And they won't accept it. Like, they won't take it. The world that Justin Timberlake could have lived in with Britney as his beautiful wife, the world that Kevin Federline could have lived in with Britney as his beautiful wife, the world that like Jamie and Lynn Spears could have lived in with like a daughter that they loved and respected and supported. Like, it's so devastating to think about the relationship she could have had that people threw in the trash.
So she's trying to salvage her relationship with Kevin. She's like, I know it's bad, but hopefully we can fix it. She keeps finding him in all these different studios that he's working in. When I found him, he had shaved his head. He was getting ready to shoot the cover for his album. He was in the studio all the time. He really thought he was a rapper now. Bless his heart, because he did take it so seriously.
Oh, you pathetic little bitch. I can't believe, I mean, she has Reese Witherspoon Southern grace here. The way that was the most scathing thing I've ever heard in the sweetest way possible. a genius, an icon, a legend.
And so I showed up in Vegas carrying Sean Preston, still pregnant with Jaden James, full of sympathy for Kevin's situation. He was trying to make something happen for himself, and everyone seemed to be doubting him. But I also felt like he should have been checking in on me more and should have been spending time with me. Our little family was my heart. I'd had his babies inside of me for a very long time, and I'd sacrificed a lot. I had all but abandoned my career. I had done everything to make our life possible.
It felt like everyone was shunning me.
And then one of her brother's friends, Jason Trowick, came in. So basically she goes to visit Kevin. And again, the security guards are like, you and your sons cannot come in here. For the studio that I'm sure she paid for.
His album was not paying for the studio time.
I was at the hotel devastated. It's Jason Trowick. He'd heard what had happened. How are you doing? He asked. He seemed to genuinely care how I answered. When was the last time someone asked me that, I wondered.
After the babies, I felt like a completely different person. It was confusing. So she says she now knows that she was suffering from pretty severe postpartum depression. I got a little depressed once I was no longer keeping them safe in my body. She does this interview with Matt Lauer where he says, the people were asking questions about me, including, is Britney Spears a bad mom? He never said who was asking them. Everyone, apparently. He asked me what I thought it would take for the paparazzi to leave me alone. I wish he'd ask them, so whatever it was, I could do exactly that.
Kevin and I had gotten better at hiding the kids after Jaden was born, so much so that people were wondering why no picture of him had been released. I think if anyone had thought about that question for a second, they could have come up with some guesses. But no one was really asking the question. They just kept acting like I owed it to them to let the men who were trying to catch me looking fat take photos of my infant sons.
So she becomes obsessed with redecorating this perfect house that she's bought for her, Kevin, and the two children. She's obsessed with getting it done entirely in white marble, which is extremely true to self. There is no question for me whether or not this is an accuracy in the book.
She's like, sorry to the contractors, that was a bit crazy. I'd gone over the top. I look back now and think, God, that was bad. I'm sorry, contractors. I think I care too much. She just wanted to have a perfect nest and a perfect home for her kids. She talks about how she lived next door to Mel Gibson and Sandy from Grease. I'd see her and I'd call out, hi, Olivia Newton-John. How are you, Olivia Newton-John?
I had those two kids back to back. My hormones were all over the place. I was meaner than hell and so bossy. It was such a big deal for me to have kids. In trying to make our home perfect, I'd gone over the top. I look back now and I think, God, that was so bad. I mean, give yourself some grace, my friend.
It was my home and my nest. It was fucking beautiful. But I think I knew then that I'd become weird.
With Kevin away so much, no one was around to see me spiral except every paparazzi in America.
She also has this interesting thing that she says where she feels like when she's around people that she's protecting, she almost has this empathetic thing where she becomes vulnerable the way they are. And she said being around her babies, it almost like made her a baby because she just like understood how their fragility made her fragile. Anyway, so she's pregnant and she's doing Blackout. Recording Blackout, I felt so much freedom. Working with these amazing producers I got to play. And she says she was just like in there cutting records like nobody's business because the paparazzi were stalking her. She only had half an hour at any given time to go anywhere. So she said she would go to the studio and be there for 30 minutes and come out with a song. She said she did Gimme More in 2 takes.
Insane. The album was a battle cry. After years of being meticulous, trying to please my mom and my dad, it was my time to say, fuck you. I quit doing business the way I always had before. I started doing videos on the street myself. I would go into bars with a friend and the friend would just bring a camera and that's how we shot Gimme More. And she's like, that video kind of sucked, but it was punk.
To be clear, I'm not saying I'm proud of it. Gimme More is by far the worst video I've ever shot in my life. I don't like it at all. It's so tacky. It looks like we only spent $3,000 to shoot it. And yet, even though it was bad, it worked for what it was. And she's just like, I had to figure it out. I just had to work with good people that I found word of mouth. And she says, Blackout is one of the easiest, most satisfying albums I ever made. When I recorded Hot as Ice, I walked into the studio and she said it was spiritual. My voice went the highest it had ever gone. I sang it 2 times through and left. I didn't even have to try.
I love her. Ultimately, when family life is bad, that takes over and makes everything good on the other side feel less good. I mourn how unpleasant things got with my family, yet I remain proud of that album.
God, meanwhile, Kevin was doing a lot of
Basically, he gets a Super Bowl commercial for Nationwide Insurance.
where he makes fun of himself. He's a drive-through worker pretending to be a pop star. After he got that offer, I basically never saw him. It was like he was too good to even talk to me.
Too good? Charli D'Amelio did a Super Bowl commercial when she was like 4.5.
A girl in my dorm floor did a Super Bowl commercial. I don't think she would have said, and now I'm too good for Britney Spears. I don't think any of us have ever been too good for Britney Spears.
Literally none of us. If we spent decades in a monk-like state pursuing our best selves, we would not be good enough for the angel on this earth.
He told everyone else that being a father was everything to him, the best thing in his life. You wouldn't know it because the sad truth was he was away a lot. You know, and he also has, in addition to these 2 kids he's neglecting, he also neglected 2 kids to come make them. He ditched his pregnant girlfriend who already had a child by him to come get Britney Spears pregnant and then ditch those kids. He has ditched kids in Australia, has ditched kids here. He's ditching kids across the world.
Yeah. So she then files for divorce because she was convinced that he was about to file for divorce and it would look better if she filed. So she was told no matter what, a divorce would be filed, and everyone convinced her in order to avoid being humiliated again, she should set the divorce in motion. So she files for divorce, and this is then used against her.
And then she finds out that it means she's legally on the hook for his divorce bills.
Yeah.
So she has to pay for his lawyer. And then because she has the purest heart in the whole world, she says, so either everybody's making fun of me, which of course hurts, or they're making fun of him. But in the press, they often did this by being cruel toward Kevin, which actually wasn't that helpful. And she talks about going on Jimmy Kimmel and him making monologue about how he's the world's first ever no-hit wonder. And she's like, that is the father of my child. It's so mean the way people treated him. Everyone seemed to be delighted by the news of my divorce, except for me. I did not feel like celebrating. Looking back, I think that both Justin and Kevin were very clever. They knew what they were doing and I played right into it. That's the thing about this industry. I never knew how to play the game. I didn't know how to present myself on any level. I was a bad dresser. Hell, I'm still a bad dresser, and I'll admit that. And I work on that, but I try. But as much as I'll own my flaws, ultimately, I know that I'm a good person. I can see now that you have to be smart enough, vicious enough, deliberate enough to play the game. And I did not know how to play the game. I was truly innocent, just clueless. I was a newly single mom of 2 little boys. I didn't have time to fix my hair before I went out into a sea of photographers. So I was young and I made a lot of mistakes, but I will say this, I wasn't manipulative. I was just stupid. That's one thing Justin and Kevin ruined about me. I used to trust people, but after the breakup with Justin and then my divorce, I never really did trust people again. Guns. We need guns.
The last guns I'll allow in America are the ones pointed at their homes.
Gun owners,
get out of here and point them in the right direction. Part of me sometimes wondered reading this book if she listened to Who's With Tabs, because we did very regularly call her the most naturally stunning, vulnerable, kind, lovely, famous person who wears their own candies for Kohl's line.
I hope she listens to this episode because I guess she put out on Instagram that she's very unhappy with all of the press coverage of her book.
Yeah.
And the way they're focusing on headlines and everybody's missing the point. And Britney, if you're listening, please reach out to us. Let us know if you think we're getting the point. We're trying very hard to find the point.
Yeah.
We think it was right there. We found the point obvious. But if you feel we did not do it justice, we will re-record this episode or quit the podcast.
Yeah, let us know.
You pick.
So she becomes friends with Paris Hilton. Paris Hilton's like the only person who's there for her. And she goes through a little bit of a party stage, but her party stage is like drinking a medium amount at clubs, which is like not that crazy of a thing for a very famous 25-year-old to do.
I heard nothing but that I was the worst mother who'd ever lived and a terrible person too. The tabloids were full of accusations. She's a slut. She's on drugs.
So she would go out and party with Paris and make sure her mother, she would have her mom, the grandmother of these children, watching the kids. And so she's like, I don't think that that's that bad. If I want to have a night out, but I'm sure to have round the clock trusted care for my children, is that not a responsible thing to do? And so she gets home after a night of drinking and her mom just lays into her the way she used to scream at her dad. Her mom starts freaking out. She says it was because she was wasted. The shame I felt killed my heart. I stood there reeling and I thought, okay, I guess it's forbidden for me to party. My mom always made me feel like I was bad or guilty of something, even though I'd worked so hard to be good. That's what my family had always done, treated me like I was bad. The fight marked a turning point in my relationship with my mom. It couldn't go back to the way it was before. We tried, but it didn't really work.
No matter how many fans I had in the world, my parents never seemed to think I was worth much. How could you treat your child like that when she was going through a divorce, when she was lonely and lost? She also says at this time the only drug she ever did was Adderall when she would go out. And it's interesting she says this because at the beginning of the book, when her parents were doing well with the gym that her dad owned, she said that they would throw these all-night parties that they ran the social hub of their Kentwood home. And she said they would stay up all night dancing. And she goes, I think their drug of choice must have been speed for these all-night parties because that was the drug of choice in the 80s. And I find that little line to be interesting to then compare. She goes, look, sometimes I'd go out and I would do Adderall.
Yeah.
She also said it would make her less depressed. It was the only thing that worked for me as an antidepressant. And I felt like I really needed one of those.
Yeah. So she is not allowed to go out because she gets in trouble. And also the paparazzi is obsessed with her. And also the world is obsessed with calling her a bad mom. So she is cut off from essentially everyone in the world. Cut off from my friends, I started to get weird. I know you're supposed to focus on only being a mother at those times, but it was hard to sit down and play with them each day. To put being a mother first, I felt so confused. All I had known my whole life was being exposed on every level. I didn't know where to go or what to do. Was I supposed to go home to Louisiana to get a house with a wall around it and hide? Justin and Kevin were able to have all the sex and smoke all the weed in the world and no one said a word to them. I came home from a night at the club and my own mother tore into me. It made me so scared to do anything. My family made me feel paralyzed.
As part of his bid for full custody, Kevin tried to convince everyone that I was completely out of control. He started to say that I shouldn't have my kids anymore at all. When he said that, I remember thinking, surely this is a joke. This is just for the tabloids. When you read about married celebrities fighting, you never really know what's real. I always assume that a lot of what you hear are stories being fed to the papers as some sort of ploy to get the upper hand in a custody battle. So I kept waiting for him to bring the boys back to me after he took them. He not only wouldn't bring them back to me, but he wouldn't let me see them for weeks on end.
Can I say the fact that she went to literally 13 years of prison for one time being delayed at giving the boys back, and he started the pattern? This is not information we had before that this was a pattern from Kevin. I knew that it was fucked up that he was going for custody, but I did not know that he was kidnapping her children.
In January 2007, my aunt Sandra died after a long and brutal struggle with ovarian cancer. She was like my second mother. This would have been Laura Lynn's mother. So she just became like so depressed. On the inside, I felt a cloud of darkness for a long time.
So her kids have been taken from her. Her aunt is dead. Her parents are dickwads.
So she starts just going to Kevin's house and begging to just see the boys. She is suffering from postpartum depression. Her aunt has just died. She is being tortured by her family and the press, and all she wants is to see her boys.
So she's banging at the door of Kevin,
and he will not let her see them.
And it's being photographed.
The paparazzi watched it all happen. I can't describe the humiliation I felt. I was cornered. I was out being chased, like always, by these men who were waiting for me to do something they could photograph. I went into the hair salon and I took the clippers and I shaved off my hair. Nobody seemed to understand that I was simply out of my mind with grief. My children had been taken away from me.
Can I say, the fact that the paparazzi watched her get turned away from seeing her own children that night and the story was just the hair? I mean, shame on them too. More guns.
Oh, that one paparazzo who did that documentary that she names later, he needs to be bullied out of existence.
Yes. I'm sorry, but these people are all responsible for 13 years of imprisonment.
Shaving my head was a way of saying to the world, fuck you. You want me to be pretty for you? Fuck you. You want me to be a good girl for you? Fuck you. You want me to be your dream girl? Fuck you. I've been the good girl for years. I smiled politely while TV show hosts leered at my breasts, while American parents said I was destroying their children by wearing a crop top, while executives patted my hand condescendingly and second-guessed my career choices, even though I'd sold millions of records, while my family acted like I was evil and I was tired of it.
I was becoming incredibly angry. I think a lot of women understand this. A friend of mine once said, if someone took my baby away from me, I would have done a lot more than get a haircut. I would have burned the city to the ground.
Flailing those weeks without my children, I lost it over and over again. I didn't even know how to take care of myself. She was living in some weird house. The paparazzi wouldn't leave her alone. She heads back to Kevin's with her cousin Allie. She just keeps going back and just begging, like, let me see my babies. And the paparazzi will not leave her alone.
So she attacks the car with the green umbrella, the famous green umbrella. She's like, I get that it was silly. I just didn't know what else to do.
She said I would never hurt anybody. She ended up having to pay for that guy. They had begged these guys, please leave us alone. And they just kept saying, here's what we're going to do. You just answer our questions and then we'll go. They were owed through contract her lowest emotional moments. So she snaps. I'm so embarrassed by what I'd done that I'd sent the photo agency an apology note mentioning that I'd be running for a dark film role, which was true, and that I wasn't quite myself, which was also true. Later, that paparazzo would say in an interview for a documentary about me, that was not a good night for her, but it was a good night for us because we got the money shot.
You should go to fucking jail. So once again, to back it up, out of anyone that's ever been in her life, we had her family. Absolutely useless. We have her first love, Justin Timberlake. Dipshit from hell who used her to further his own career.
Didn't just use her, abused her.
Abused her to further his own career. Next up, Kevin Federline. Once again, used and abused to nothing his own nothing. I'm sorry, it's so nothing. Everything he's achieved is so impossibly nothing. I can't believe the damage he's done with his absolute inability to do anything.
So she's just shaved her head. She's desperate to get her children back. She is struggling. And how does her family respond? She goes to visit her brother. Her mom's there. And it was like she wouldn't even look at me because I was ugly now. It just proved that the world only cares about your physical appearance, even if you were suffering and you're at your lowest point. They tell her that she has to go to rehab. Her dad says, you are a disgrace.
They sent her to rehab for substance abuse. She's like, well, maybe I could have gone for grief and rage. But also I will say, I don't think she had a rage problem. I think she had very valid reasons to feel furious with the world. She's already been let down at every turn. I can't believe that anyone could let her down more than they already have. And it gets so much worse. It gets colossally worse, as we know.
So she goes to rehab for the month. She gets out and she gets temporary 50-50 custody. But the battle kept raging with Kevin and it was eating me alive. So then Blackout comes out and it is the album she is most proud of in her whole career, she says. It comes out around Halloween. She's supposed to perform Give Me More. And she says, listen, the whole point is that her team is like, if you go and do this performance, Give Me More at the VMAs, everybody will see you're fine. And she goes, but I was not fine. She was struggling. She had just had 2 babies. She can't sleep. She's depressed. She did not get enough help with her costume or her hair or rehearsals. She feels underprepared. She's overwhelmed. She runs into Justin in the backstage. She was at the height of his career. It literally causes her to have a panic attack. Yes, granted, it was far from my best at other times. I could see myself on video throughout the auditorium while I performed. It looked like I was looking at myself in a funhouse mirror.
We all have bad nights. They don't usually have consequences so extreme.
She's like, it was a bad performance. Did I need to fucking go to jail?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sarah Silverman comes out to roast her. She said at the age of 25, I'd done everything worthwhile in my life I'd ever do. She called my two babies the most adorable mistakes you'll ever see. I didn't hear that until later, though. At the time, I was backstage hysterically sobbing. All that anybody talked about was how bad my body and performance were. Dr. Phil called it a train wreck.
So she has to go to court then to prove that she's a fit mother. Her management team quits. Her bodyguard went to court as a witness in custody. He said that she was doing drugs, but he was not cross-examined. A court-appointed parenting coach said that I loved my children and we had clearly bonded. She said there was nothing at all in my home that could be called abuse, but that part did not make headlines. So this is January 2008. She has custody of her kids and a go-between is coming to pick them up and take them to Kevin's house. They take one boy to the car and then they come back for the other boy and she has an absolute meltdown and locks herself in the bathroom with Jaden.
She is scared that when she gives back her kid, she will never see him again.
Which, can I say, has never once been publicized as a legitimate fear. Everyone always talks about how she just like had an absolute mental breakdown. She had at this point already been deprived for like 6 to 8 weeks at a time from seeing her young babies.
And she says the nanny said, it's fine. You can take a couple more minutes with Jaden there. And she says, and then the SWAT team literally bat down the door.
Kevin took my world away from me. He knocked the breath out of me and my family did not hold me. I began to suspect that they were secretly celebrating that I was having the worst time in my life. That surely couldn't be the case, right? Surely I was paranoid, right?
She also finds out from a magazine that Jamie Lynn is pregnant.
So she is put on a 5150 hold for locking herself in the bathroom with her son, which like, again, doesn't look good, but no one ever talked about the pattern of her kids being withheld. So she starts acting mean. She starts acting crazy because she's like,
you say I'm crazy, I got you crazy.
Yeah. She starts driving recklessly. She starts dating that paparazzi. I talked as if I were out of my mind. I was so loud everywhere I went, even at restaurants. People would go out to eat with me and I would lie down on the table. It was a way of saying fuck you to any person that came my way. And I mean it. I was bad.
So she's dating the photographer. It's this paparazzi who's 10 years older than her. And I think at least defended her. And that was all she was looking for. She was just looking for one person who says, I don't think what you're doing is evil. And I will fight people who say that it is. And so they start dating. She, of course, doesn't know that he's actually married and she's the mistress.
So at this point of the book, 2 things I believe are missing. One is Sam Lefty, and one is Original Doll.
Yes.
So Original Doll is supposedly a secret album that she recorded and was not allowed to release, that the song Mona Lisa was on.
We will definitely talk about Mona Lisa with Troy on the Patreon this week. I have to say, it is one of the craziest stories you've ever heard. It's her like escaping her security detail and entering, Kiss FM in LA, barefoot, New Year's Day, telling them to play a song that the record label claims doesn't exist.
Yes. So that is missing from the book. I wonder if she maybe just doesn't remember it because it's so deep inside of trauma.
I mean, listen, in her 25-year career at this point, this is a 280-page book. She kind of has some top notes she's hitting, but there's a lot of details that aren't here.
I will say she either doesn't remember it or it's like less important for her than it is to us.
I think maybe it's not that important to her in this book because what she was trying to accomplish with that moment and of Original Doll and the Mona Lisa smile
is done by this book.
Yes, it was her begging to escape the situation she was in. She was begging for somebody to hear her side. And I think this book accomplishes that. The Sam Lefty of it all is missing.
Can I say the Sam Lefty of it all, I believe, is not included because it feels like the roller coaster of repetitiveness. My family was not there for me. I put my trust in a rando. The rando betrayed me. That happens 7 times in this book.
I wonder if she still doesn't have clarity on what went wrong there. But she says the photographer encouraged me to rebel. He let me sow my oats and he still loved me for it.
Oh, he liked the attention and he was a paparazzi with access to Britney Spears.
I also do think there was something he did not have her best interest at mind. He is somebody that you only date when you are in a bad fucking situation. He is a crisis boyfriend. I think everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of us can relate to when you meet a guy and start dating him at your lowest, it is important to him that you stay at your lowest because he knows the minute you get up, you're going to leave him. And I think that that's what's going on here. And she was mistaking him celebrating her wild and encouraging her to rebel, not as him loving the real her, but as him
keeping her low.
Keeping her low because the consequences of her rebelling were that her family had alienated her. She was about to be prisoned. She had no team.
Her mom is acting weird and invites her over. Just come to the house. We want to talk to you. So I went to the house with them. The photographer met me there. My mother was acting suspicious. Suddenly, she is swarmed by a SWAT team, strapped to a gurney, and rolled away. What the fuck did I do? I kept shouting. I didn't do anything.
I know I'd been acting wild, but there was nothing I'd done that justified their treating me like I was a bank robber. Nothing that justified it upending my entire life.
So this is when she meets Lou Taylor, her dad's new partner in crime. She later finds out her dad was in debt to Lou Taylor in some way.
$40,000, which is part of what helped overturn the conservatorship, that it was a conflict of interest for this woman who her dad owed money to be like giving her legal rights to Britney Spears, the person and the entity.
And at this point, Lou Taylor was kind of a rando. She had just started a new company called TriStar Sports and Entertainment, but didn't really have clients yet. She built the entire company off the name Britney Spears.
He paid himself more than $6 million while paying others close to him tens of millions more. He was making more than she was making during the time of the conservatorship.
The thing is, you can have a conservatorship that lasts for 2 months and then the person gets on track and you let them control their life again. But that was not what my father wanted. He wanted far more. So he sets up 2 forms of conservatorship. Conservatorship over her person and conservatorship of the estate. So he is in control over the person, what she eats, what she drinks, where she goes, where she lives.
Who she can marry, who she can talk to.
He's also in control of the estate, aka her entire career and her finances.
Andrew Wallet, Mr. Wallet, the puppet that we think was invented.
And Mr. Wallet says
he is in control of the estate and he was making $426,000 a year. That's almost $500,000 a year to keep me away from my own money. And she was not allowed to replace him. They also employed this woman, Robin Greenhill, who ruled her life and monitored every move I made.
So that was like technically her assistant for the time. She also had a court-appointed lawyer who was also paid about $500,000 a year, or her dad-appointed lawyer. She was told she was not allowed to replace, but she now knows she could have. But how could she have known?
She was specifically told that she was considered so unfit that she couldn't even pick her own lawyer. Later, her lawyer goes, even mass murderers get to pick their own lawyer. Of course you could have. And she goes, my mom could have got me on the phone. I don't know why it had to be the governor of Louisiana, but she's like, she could have got me on the phone with the governor of Louisiana who could have said to me, Britney, of course you can have your own lawyer.
I think that she like doesn't quite understand how literally anyone in her life could have helped her. So she's like, well, my mom had access to the governor. That's a powerful person. Any person could have helped her if she'd been allowed to be in touch with anyone who had her best interests in mind. But she was blocked from everybody.
I can't say my mom was that much better. She'd acted innocent while she was there for 2 sleepover nights with my girlfriends and me. She'd known the whole time that they were going to take me away. Soon after I was brought to the hospital against my will, I was informed that the conservatorship papers had been filed.
As everything was falling apart for me, my mother was writing a memoir. She wrote about watching her beautiful daughter shave off her hair and wondered how that was possible. She said that I used to be the happiest little girl in the world. When I made the wrong move, it was like my mother wasn't concerned. She would share every mistake on television promoting her book.
She wrote it trading on my name and talking about her parenting of me and my brother and my sister at a time when all 3 of us kids were basket cases. Jamie Lynn was a pregnant teenager. Brian was struggling to find his place in the world and still convinced he was letting our father down, and I was in full meltdown. The book was huge for her and all at my expense. The timing was unfucking believable.
I'm willing to admit that in the throes of severe postpartum depression, abandonment by my husband, and the torture of being separated from my 2 babies, the death of my adored Aunt Sandra, and the constant drumbeat pressure from the paparazzi, I'd begun to think in some ways like a child.
And yet I look at the worst things I did during that time, and I don't believe the sum total of them is anywhere near as cruel as what my mother did by writing and promoting that book.
I mean, fuck you, Lynn.
She just says, like, I cannot imagine looking at my children at the worst times in their life and doing anything but dropping to my knees and trying to help them. The idea of profiting off of their exploitation and pain. Sometimes I talk trash on Instagram. People don't know why I have such anger towards my parents, but I think if they were in my shoes, they would understand. Can I read one more insane quote? The last thing I would do would be to cut my hair into a bob and put on the tasteful pantsuit and sit down on a morning show set across from Meredith fucking Vieira and make money off my child's misfortune.
Fuck you, Meredith Vieira. Also,
the conservatorship was created supposedly because I was incapable of doing anything at all, feeding myself, spending my own money, being a mother, anything. So why is it that a few weeks later, they had me shoot an episode of How I Met Your Mother and then sent me on a grueling world tour? We asked the same question. How is a woman who cannot have access to a debit card or choose when she has her IUD put in or out or control what she eats
or eat a fucking slice of cake?
She was not allowed to eat what she wanted for 2 years. For 2 years, everything was fed to her. All she could have was chicken and vegetables because her dad kept saying, you're too fat. And this woman also brought in millions of dollars internationally.
Horrifying.
Good question, Britney.
She still would do her own accounting. She liked to do her own expenses. She kept all her receipts in a bowl, and at the end of the month, she would sit down and calculate all of her expenses and file them.
Even when I was going through a wild spell, the fundamentals of who I was as a person were still there. To me, that bowl of receipts was proof that I was still capable of managing my affairs. I knew musicians who did heroin, got in fistfights, and threw TVs out of hotel rooms. Not only didn't I steal anything or hurt anyone or do hard drugs, I was keeping track of my tax deductions.
Not anymore. My father shoved aside my bowl of receipts, setting up his things on the bar. I just want to let you know, he said, I call the shots. You sit right in that chair and I'll tell you what goes on. I looked at him with a growing sense of horror. I'm Britney Spears now, he said. I mean, this is a horror movie.
That's how it felt.
It really did.
It really felt like I don't know how she's going to get out of here.
I don't know how she did. I'm so horrified that this happened to her. I'm so horrified that no one knew. I'm so horrified.
No, but that's the thing.
People did know.
People knew and no one spoke up for her.
Yeah.
The amount of celebrities, at one point she wrote Glory with Julia Michaels. Julia.
You knew.
So many people knew and just nobody spoke up for her.
Yeah.
So she just talks about what it was like under this conservatorship. If she went to somebody's house, her security team had to walk through the house, remove all the drugs, including Tylenol, and nobody was allowed to drink around her. She said in order to date somebody, the security team would do a full background check on them, make them sign an NDA, and have them submit a blood test. And then before a date, Robin would tell the man my medical and sexual history. It was humiliating.
I didn't have a lot of fight left in me. I was tired and I was scared too. If I play along, surely they'll see how good I am and they will let me go. So I went along with it. It's exactly as we predicted. She was manipulated with her children. They said, if you don't do what we say, you won't see your children anymore. If you don't do what we say, we'll take this away, this privilege, that privilege. She had been stripped away from so much humanity that just the littlest things kept her playing the game because she didn't know what else to do and no one told her there was another option.
Felicia had been fired and she later found out that her dad had told Felicia that Britney did not want her around anymore. And she's like, I didn't even know. Of course I would have never done that, Felicia. I never saw some of my really close friends again, still haven't to this day. It made me shut down psychologically even more than I had before.
To see them as much as possible, I did everything I could to appease Kevin. I paid his legal bills, plus child support, plus thousands more a month so the kids could come along with me on the circus tour. Within the same short period of time, I appeared on Good Morning America and did the Christmas tree lighting in Los Angeles, a segment for Ellen, toured through Europe and Australia. But again, the question was nagging me. If I was so sick that I couldn't make my own decisions, why did they think it was fine for me to be out there smiling and waving and singing and dancing in a million time zones a week?
They decided where I went and with who. Under Robin's directions, security guards handed me prepackaged envelopes of meds and watched me take them. They put parental controls on my iPhone. Everything was scrutinized and controlled, everything. I would go to sleep early and then I would wake up and do what they told me to do again and again and again. It was like Groundhog Day. I did that for 13 years.
My freedom in exchange for naps with my children. It was a trade I was willing to make. There is nothing I love more, nothing more important to me on this earth than my children, so I laid my life down for them.
And of course, they're all making money off of everything she does.
TriStar gets 5% of everything. The circus tour grossed $130 million. Not to mention just the bonuses her dad would just heap to everybody.
I have a lot of compassion for the woman I was before I was put into the conservatorship when I was recording Blackout. Even though I was being described as so rebellious and such a wild girl, all my best work was accomplished during that time. All in all, it was a terrible time. I had 2 little babies. There was always a fight around me trying to see them.
I had to grow my hair out and get back into shape. You ruined me as a person, I wanted to tell my father, and now you're making me work for you. I'll do it, but I'll be damned if I put my heart into it. I became a robot, but not just a robot, a sort of child robot. I had been so infantilized that I was losing pieces of what made me feel like myself.
If I thought getting criticized about my body in the press was bad, it hurt even more coming from my father. He repeatedly told me I looked fat and that I was going to have to do something about it. So every day I would put on my sweats and I would go to the gym. I would do little bits of creative stuff here and there, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. As far as my passion for singing and dancing was almost a joke at that point.
So her parents end up actually getting back together. This is the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. She says that her mom was into her dad again now that he had a job, the job being torturing his daughter. I felt so betrayed. My mom seemed to love that because of the conservatorship. My dad had a real job. They watched Criminal Minds on the couch every fucking night. Who does that? That is pathetic. If you're going to be a literal supervillain, sucking the life and every dime out of your own fucking daughter who has only ever wanted love and attention and joy and a family that cares about her, the least you could do is use that supervillain power and money to do something more fucking interesting than watch Criminal Minds on the couch every night.
Go on a yacht.
Why not a yacht?
Why not yacht? In 2008, I won more than 20 awards. I sometimes thought that it was almost funny how I won those awards for an album I made while I was supposedly so incapacitated that I had to be controlled by my family. The truth was, though, when I stopped to think about it for very long, it wasn't funny at all. I agree, Britt.
She's dating Jason Trowick. He becomes her co-conservator, and the love kind of evaporates when he becomes her owner.
She says because she was in this conservatorship, she did become childlike. And she's like, it's hard to explain how quickly I could facilitate between being a little girl and being a teenager and being a woman because of the way they had robbed me of my freedom. There was no way for me to behave like an adult since they wouldn't treat me like an adult. So I would regress and act like a little girl. But then the adult self would step back in, Only my world didn't allow me to be an adult. The woman in me was pushed down for a long time. They wanted me to be wild on stage, the way they told me to be, and to be a robot for the rest of the time.
So she does the X Factor and then she gets offered a Vegas residency. I thought, why not? My heart wasn't in recording music anymore. I wasn't passionately driven like I used to be. I had no more fire to bring. I was so over it.
She says she hated doing live TV because she has such bad social anxiety. She'd be nervous all day. She's like, I don't like sitting in a room for 4 hours judging people.
I also would like to call out every person involved with the X Factor for not saying something. Every person who lives in Las Vegas for not saying something. So she does the Vegas residency. She doesn't really like it because she has to do the same thing every day.
She likes it for year 1. By year 3, she's like, can we do one new song? And they're like, no, that would mean we have to change everything. She'd be like, great, let's change everything. They'd be like, no.
Yeah. She's like, everyone was just so lazy. Everyone was so complacent. Everyone was just making money off of me. She also starts dating this guy who is like giving her energy supplements and she really likes them. And then her dad finds out about them and threatens to send her to rehab.
She did go to rehab. The place he chose for me was in Malibu.
Oh my God.
That month for hours a day, we had to do boxing and other exercises outside because there was no gym. And she said she was scared. She was like in a serious drug addict's rehab. And she was just like, I don't know what the hell I was doing.
Her dad puts her on this strict diet of just chicken and veggies.
Canned veggies.
Ew.
2 years is a long time to not be able to eat what you want, especially when it's your body and your work and your soul making the money that everyone's living off of. 2 years of asking for French fries and being told no. I found it so degrading.
I gained weight. Even though I wasn't eating as much, he made me feel so ugly and like I wasn't good enough. Maybe it's because of the power of your thoughts. Whatever you think you are, you become. I was so beaten down and low, I just surrendered.
My family would stay in Destin, a pretty beach town in Florida, at a ridiculously beautiful condo that I bought for them and eat good tasting food every night while I was starving and working.
No one else but me seemed to find it outrageous that my father would set all these rules and then go out and drink Jack and Cokes.
I was given an allowance of about $2,000 a week. If I wanted a pair of sneakers that my conservators didn't think I needed, I would be told no. This despite the fact that I did 248 shows and sold more than 900,000 tickets in Vegas. Each show paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know what breaks my heart?
The dance studio.
One of the things that brought me solace and hope during this time when I was in Vegas was teaching dance to kids at a studio once a month, and I loved it.
We always said on Who's With Tabs that we think that Britney Spears should have put out her first 3 albums and maybe Blackout and then gone and just bought a dance studio in Louisiana and had a family and taught kids how to dance. I think she could still do it, actually.
So in 2014, she's like, I gotta get out of this. She goes to the court. She says, my father's an alcoholic. Isn't that bad? And they go, no, we don't really care. What followed was a cloak and dagger effort to get my own lawyer. I even mentioned the conservatorship on a talk show in 2016, but somehow that part of the interview didn't make it to air. Huh, how interesting.
The feeling of being trapped contributed to the collapse of my romantic life. So her boyfriend breaks up with her, or she and her boyfriend break up. It just seems like kind of a mutual ghosting.
So then she records Glory. She feels so proud of Glory. She works on it with Julia Michaels and Justin Tranter. They wrote everything. She meets Hissam Ashgari on the set of Slumber Party. She says, I was instantly smitten.
She says right away the tabloids all said he was cheating on her. And she's like, we'd been dating 2 weeks. How could you even cheat during that time? I started to feel like I was in a cult and my father was the cult leader. They were treating me like I was beholden to them. So he starts sending her to AA, and she is actually very inspired by the stories people are telling in AA.
You cannot keep her down. You send her to AA meetings and she will find heroes. In the most demoralizing moments of my Las Vegas residency, I wore tight wigs and I danced in a way where I wouldn't move a hair on my head. Everyone who was making money off me wanted me to move my hair and I knew it. And so I did everything but that. She has this interesting thing that goes in on out about how like men love it when you thrash your hair and move your hair. And she's like, her hair is such a symbol to her of the way she's allowed to express herself. She will not move her hair against her own will. She'll shave her head.
The 3rd year in Vegas, I felt something within me that I hadn't felt in a really long time. I felt strong and I knew I had to do something. Once I started to return to myself, my body, my heart, my physicality, my spiritual self could not take the conservatorship any longer. There came a point when my little heart said, I am not going to stand for this.
I began to escape into a new dream, freedom from my family, and a return to be the artist I knew I had in me.
So the residency is supposed to end December 31st, 2017. And she wants to go on a trip with her kids. And they keep pushing it off. They keep pushing it off. And they go, okay, and now you're going to do a tour for Glory. And she's like, what the fuck? And then they're going to announce a new Vegas residency.
I just have to say, like, she is like really in full, how do I get out of this mode? I think being with Sam and they wanted to have a baby, but they wouldn't let her take her IUD out. And she was just like, how do I get out of here? She says that it turns out that they had been monitoring and reviewing calls and texts coming out of and going into my cell phone, including private texts with my lawyer, with my own kids. And that apparently my dad even put a bug in my own home. This was all part of their control. Residency is set to end and they're like, no, you got to do something new, but you can't change it. You got to keep going. It felt like they wanted to embarrass me rather than let me give my fans the best possible performance every night, which they deserved.
And then another breaking point for her was when she gets this like dedication at an award show where they do this arrangement of all of her top hits and Jamie Lynn gets to perform. And she's like, I've been asking to do new arrangements of my songs for so long. And here Jamie Lynn is getting to perform my songs in a way that is fun. Fuck this.
So she had hoped that they could go to Maui. And of course, they're like, yeah, you can have the summer off. And they don't give her the summer off. They give her 3 weeks.
And then they start threatening her. They say, like, if we will take you to court if you don't do what we say. So then we have this famous announcement where she announces her new Vegas residency. She's supposed to perform. She's supposed to answer questions. But Mario Lopez announces her and she like walks down the stage and into a car and away.
And she's so scared. She's like, they're plotting something. They acted really nice afterwards, but she's like, what are they going to do next?
And they bring her to a horrific solitary confinement rehab. They make her go to this rehab that is $60,000 a month for this private situation where she sees no other people. She is with no other people. They put her on lithium. And this is when the Free Britney movement started. So everyone remembers when she walked off that stage and everyone was like, what the fuck just happened? And then no one saw her for months. And I will say, the other thing that's missing from this book is her father's supposed illness.
Yes.
Supposedly her dad almost died during this time from like a colon rupture. They send her to a facility against her own will, and she doesn't want to go, but she doesn't know what to do because she's been strapped to a gurney and taken against her own will before. So she'd rather walk into the car than say no and see what happens.
The hardest part was that I believed in front of the doctors or visitors, I had to pretend the whole time that I was okay. If I became flustered, it was taken as evidence that I wasn't improving. If I got upset and asserted myself, I was out of control and crazy. She says it reminds her of back in the day when they would test to see if someone was a witch. They'd throw in a pond. If she could float, she was a witch and would be killed. And if she sunk and died, well, I guess she wasn't a witch.
God.
She would call her dad and beg him to let her out. And he says, it's not up to me, it's up to the doctor. She texted Jamie Lynn and said, please help me get out of here. Stop fighting it. She texted back, there's nothing you can do about it, so stop fighting it.
They kept me in a chair for ages. I began to feel like I was being ritually tortured.
Along with the rest of them, she kept acting like I was a threat in some way. This will sound crazy, but I'll say it again because it's the truth. I thought they were trying to kill me.
They might have been.
They took tons of blood every day. She was alone for months, just in solitary, while doctors would be brought in and out and test her.
And they had her on lithium.
At one point, one of the nurses, the no-nonsense nurses, she says, come look at this. And she sees somebody with a Free Britney shirt on. And they start to show her that all over the web are people and fans saying, Free Britney, we know something's going on where you know she's missing. I don't think the people knew how much the Free Britney movement meant to me, especially in the beginning. Toward the end, when the court hearings were going on, seeing people advocating for me meant a whole lot. But when it first happened, that got my heart because I was not okay, not at all. And the fact that my friends and my fans sensed what was happening and did all that for me, that's a debt I can never repay. If you stood up for me when I couldn't stand up for myself, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
So she gets out of rehab.
Well, not even rehab. I want to call it like torture mental hospital prison.
Yeah.
The asylum.
She gets out of jail into a different jail. Her dad's like, we're so proud of you. And she's like, what the fuck? You just think that like now I've been beaten down once again and you can manipulate me once again.
I was a shell of myself. I was still on lithium, which made my sense of time really hazy, and I was scared. It crossed my mind that they were only visiting to finish off what they had started a few months earlier to kill me for real. If it sounds paranoid, consider all the things I've been through up until this point. The ways in which they had deceived and institutionalized me. She's like, they come in and just act like nothing had happened. Jamie Lynn's just like, oh, hey, girl. And Jamie Lynn just keeps pitching ideas for shows that the two of them can do and is like moved into her house, and her and Jamie are going around taking meetings with different entertainment people.
I was left with nothing but a blind rage. They had punished me for what? For supporting them since I was a child? I mean, literally for what? The thing is, without imprisoning her, she would have never not given her family money.
Yes, that's what's crazy. It's like they're torturing her to do the thing she would have happily done.
If they had just been nice to her.
Even if they hadn't been nice to her, she was doing it when they were being mean to her.
Yeah.
How had I managed to not kill myself in that place? Put myself out of misery like you'd shoot a lame horse? I believe that almost anyone else in my situation would have.
I didn't want them to have the power to keep me from my children or from my house or from my dogs or from my car ever again. If I can manifest anything, I thought, let me manifest an end to this.
That August, my father was arguing with Sean Preston, who was 13 at the time. My son went to lock himself in a bedroom to end the fight. My dad broke down the door and shook him. Kevin filed a police report. My father was barred from seeing the kids. So again, somebody who has literally lost the ability to see his own grandchildren is in control of her.
Can I say another fuck you to Kevin? I can't believe that he is like sharing custody with her during this entire time. The way he destroyed her, the way that he, by like making her feel loved and then like drop kicking her so fucking hard to the curb and then stealing her kids.
No, he's a part of it. He's a part of the team that took her down. He did not stand up for her and he benefited from her.
So much. It's devastating.
So then she starts getting on Instagram. She says the first step towards securing my freedom was for people to begin to understand that I was still a real person. So she gets on social media and she's like, I get that people thought I was weird, but you know what? Artists are weird. So
yeah,
she loves laughing. She admires people in the entertainment who have a sharp wit. I hope that's us, Brit.
So this is during COVID, early COVID days, and she's in like quarantine, and she even tries to reconnect with her family a little bit more because she's like, I don't know, I need to talk to somebody. The thing is, she hates to be alone, but the world has left her alone.
Or she's been isolated specifically.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say the world has left her alone. She is being locked in her house. She says every time she left, the security guards who worked for her dad, not her, would keep her controlled. And she would call her parents and they'd be like, actually, we're out and about. We'll call you later. Because she said the California state laws were so much stricter than Louisiana. So they were out
Also,
living
her personal life laws were much stricter than those of a free person.
But she's like, they just would never call me back. And so finally she just flies down there. And they had thrown out all of her stuff. They had thrown out all her Madame Alexander dolls that mattered to her so much. They had thrown out all of these personal writings of poetry that she kept in a single binder, which feels like you have room for a binder.
Especially in the house that Britney fucking bought.
In that moment, I made peace with my family, by which I mean I realized I never wanted to see them again. And I was at peace with that.
Scathing. So she finds out that she can hire her own lawyer and she gets one.
So what she does is on June 22nd, 2021, from her home in California, I called 911 to report my father for conservatorship abuse. So she had to call the cops on her own dad.
Yeah.
And that is how she got it out.
So she's still technically under her father's control. And this is when the documentaries start coming out. And this she found like semi-helpful, semi-heartbreaking because it was changing public opinion. But she also had people that she had previously trusted, like going on camera talking about like what a train wreck she is.
Mm-hmm. She says that I didn't understand how they could talk about me behind my back like that. If it was me, I would have called my friend to see if it was okay that I talked about her. I will say, I think like I remember, we only watched one because we did have this feeling of everybody is capitalizing her exploitation. None of the documentaries ever had anything new to say. I think the first one was the New York Times one. I remember me and Ashley going, oh, this isn't groundbreaking stuff. This is just a reiteration and like consolidation of everything Twitter and Free Britney movement people already knew. But I guess it was good to publicize it and make it all in one easy to find place. And then all the next ones I found really disgusting because it felt like they were just like, oh, people are talking about Britney. We can take the same thing everyone else has said and shake it up and make money ourselves. And it was just showing images of her at her worst. And she was coming out and saying, stop doing this to me. That being said, I know Felicia was in the one we watched. I imagine that Felicia could not get a hold of Britney. And I think Felicia did have this sense of like, she's being kept from me and I need to help her. And I don't know how to ask her permission.
Like, I don't think that anyone she knew previously had her number. So she finally gets to speak in her own words to a judge where she talks about the way she fears for her life, the way she's been treated. It obviously makes the rounds, the phone call heard around the world.
The judge says, thank you for coming on. We appreciate hearing how you feel. That made me feel a sense of relief, like I'd finally been listened to after 13 years. I have always worked so hard. I put up with being held down for a long time, but when my family put me in the facility, they took it too far. I was treated like a criminal. And they made me think I deserved that. They made me forget my self-worth and my value.
The whole world knew I needed a lawyer. And finally, I realized the same thing. It was time to take back control of my own life. So she finally gets a proper lawyer. He files to remove first her father, then the conservatorship as a whole. He is successful in both of them pretty quickly, actually. Like, it felt like a long time when it was happening. But then when you think about it over the context of 13 years and how the law works, and especially like getting a court case during COVID.
He filed July 26th. By September 29th, her father was removed as the conservator or suspended. And then in November, the conservatorship was over. I was free.
And she does mention that it's very important to her to help other people who are impacted by a similar corrupt system.
In the months since that phone call, I've been trying to rebuild my life day by day. I'm learning how to take care of myself and how to have some fun too.
Before the conservatorship, I would go on stage and everyone would look to me for the signal that it was time to start the show. I'd hold up my index finger and say, let's go. Under the conservatorship, I always had to wait for everyone else. I was told, we'll let you know when we're ready. I didn't feel like they treated me as if I had value. I hated it.
And then she gets out and she's like, I don't know how I feel about music. I love listening to it again, but I don't know if I want to make it or perform. But Elton John is like, do you want to do a song together? And she's so honored that they go and they have so much fun. She loves doing it.
She then spends 2 pages being like, I understand why Jamie Lynn is such a hateful little cunt. She doesn't say those words at all. She says, Jamie Lynn clearly suffered in our family home too. She grew up a child of divorce, which I did not. She didn't get a lot of parenting, and I know it was hard to try to sing and act and make her own way in the world as a shadow of the sibling who got not only most of the family's attention, but a lot of the world. My heart goes out to her for all those reasons. Oh, Britney.
But I don't think she fully understands just how desperately poor we were before she was born. Because of the money I brought to the family, she wasn't helpless in the face of our father like my mother and I were back in the 1980s. When you have nothing, the pain that gets intensified by your inability to escape. My mom and I had to witness the ugliness and the violence without believing that there was anywhere else to go. She will always be my sister, and I love her and her beautiful family. I wish the absolute best for them. She's been through a lot. She's spoken about the pain of growing up in my shadow. I'm working to feel more compassion than anger toward her and toward everyone who I feel has wronged me. It's not easy. I've had dreams in which June, her grandfather, tells me how he knows he hurt my father, who then hurt me. I felt his love, that he changed on the other side. And I hope that one day I will be able to feel better about the rest of my family too.
My anger manifests itself physically, especially with migraines. So that's something she's working through. She's also trying to rediscover her life, her joy, the activities she likes. Maybe she's going to go to Vegas again.
She's just like having fun with her life.
She addresses Instagram and she goes, I get a lot of joy from posing the way I feel sexy and taking my own picture, doing whatever I want with it. I was born into this world naked, and I honestly feel like the weight of the world has been on my shoulders. I wanted to see myself lighter and freer. And she says, the world has used and abused me, taken pictures of my body in many ways that I didn't want them to. So I can post the pictures I want to post. And you know what? Fine.
She says she got pregnant and then lost the baby, and that was devastating. I try not to think about my family too much these days, but I do wonder what they will think about this book. Because I was silenced for 13 years, I wonder if, when they see me speaking out, they've had the occasional thought, maybe she's right. I believe they have a guilty conscience, that they know deep down that it was very, very wrong to do what they did.
It took a long time for me to feel ready to tell my story. I hope it inspires people on some level and can touch hearts. Since I've been free, I've had to construct a whole different identity. And so now she feels present in her own life, in her power, in her womanhood, which I find very beautiful. And that's all I've ever wanted for her.
Oh my God. Final thoughts. Britney Spears, the woman in me.
I mean, it was everything I hoped for and more, but it's also everything I feared and more. It's a very difficult read. I think the things that happened to her are really sad and scary. I do recommend that people read it for themselves, because I do think of any book that I want I want the author's words out there. I'm like, it's Britney's.
I feel like we were almost just reading the whole thing out loud. Every sentence is so poignant. There is not an ounce of fat on this book.
Right. It is so good. It's so special. I love her so much. I want the best for her. The end.
Ditto. How many worm teenies would you like to have with Brit?
I don't want to have any worm teenies with her, but I do think, I think that people think that when someone is famous, they're told how great they are, how beautiful they are. Like, they're given support when they actually aren't hearing from anyone. And I think Britney is a really good example of that. And I think, a couple of years ago when I was like, when I think something positive about someone, I want to remember to tell them. I think I forget to do that. And so I wouldn't want to have a worm teenie with her, but I would want to meet her and say, I find your work very special and I really appreciate you.
I disagree. I want to have a worm teenie with her. I want to go to the club. I want to dance. I want to go to one of those dinner places that turns into a dance place. And I want to go to the bathroom with her. And then I want to realize that neither of us has a tampon and we have to run to CVS out in the middle of the club. And I want to go get pizza at 4 a.m. with her. And I want to go home and be like, oh my God, Bride Wars is on. Should we just watch?
I feel like if my hair was in my face, she would always have a ponytail on her wrist for me.
I feel like she would have the perfect color lip gloss in her bag that she doesn't even use. She just has it for in case she sees somebody with cool tones. Oh my God. I just want to go to the Jersey Shore with her.
Yes. I want to go to Spicy's with Britney Spears.
Oh God. Could you imagine we would do roller coasters and we would do rides and then we would just watch TV and then we would just sit at the beach and just gab. And
how fertile would you consider this soil?
5.
10 out of 5.
19 out of 5.
100 out of 5.
Perfect book. Actually, it is so good. It's exactly what you want from a memoir, specifically Britney, except for the Sam Lefty and the original doll.
Congratulations on being the most fucking vibrant angel who's ever lived.
Can we talk about a couple of lies? There was, as you said, I think there was press that she talks about being kind of assaulted by Justin in this book. There's no talk of their sex life. Also, I had heard that she had added a chapter about Sam and the divorce. There's no chapter of the such.
Unless we got too early of a copy.
I can't fathom.
Yeah.
Because we got the copy they're selling tomorrow.
Well.
Anyway, we love you guys so much. Who do we love the most?
I love the 5-star reviewing wormies.